Imagine holding so tightly to something that your very grip is what pushes it away. What if I told you the very thing you are chasing is running from you because you're chasing it? What if I told you that peace, love, and purpose are not found by force, but by surrender? The Buddha once said, "You only lose what you cling to." And in that simple truth lies a profound key to freedom. In the ancient wisdom of Buddhism, there is no greater power than letting go, because only when your hands are empty can the universe place something truly beautiful in them. This is not weakness, this is not laziness, this is the wisdom of flow, of trust, of understanding that life was never meant to be a battlefield, but a dance. So today, let's explore a powerful Buddhist lessons that will teach you how to stop chasing and start receiving by surrendering to the natural rhythm of the universe. 1. The more you chase, the more you push it away. Have you ever tried to catch a butterfly by running after it? The faster you chase it, the farther it flies. But if you sit quietly in a garden, it might land on your shoulder. Life works in a very similar way. The more you chase something with desperation, whether it's love, success, peace, or approval, the more it seems to slip through your fingers. This is not a punishment from the universe. It's a reflection, a lesson, a mirror showing you that your energy is pushing away the very thing you desire. Buddhism teaches that attachment is the root of all suffering, not because it's wrong to want something, but because craving, when mixed with fear, turns into obsession. That obsession clouds your vision. It creates tension in your mind and tightness in your body. You start believing that your happiness depends entirely on that one outcome, and so, without realizing it, you become trapped, not by the thing you want, but by your hunger for it. When you're chasing something too hard, you're unknowingly telling the universe that you're empty, that you don't trust it to bring good things into your life. You're sending a message: I don't believe I'll receive, so I must chase it down myself. And in doing that, you align your actions with fear instead of trust. You start operating from a place of lack, believing that what you want is scarce, distant, or impossible to reach. But here's the truth. The universe does not respond well to desperation. It responds to alignment, to peace, to faith. You don't have to give up your goals. You don't have to stop dreaming. You simply have to stop gripping them so tightly. Desperation squeezes the life out of your dreams. It turns desire into pressure and purpose into panic. Instead, let your dreams breathe. Be intentional, but not obsessive. Move in their direction, but do so with softness and openness. When you stop running after everything, you start to notice things, the signs you missed, the doors you never saw, the blessings you already have. You realize that peace was here all along, waiting for you to slow down. And then something beautiful happens. What you were chasing starts to find you, not because you forced it, but because you made space for it. You became still enough to receive it. You let go of the fear of not having, and that's when you stepped into the energy of already having. That's when life starts to flow, effortlessly, gently, and perfectly in time. 2. Surrender is not giving up, it's waking up. Many people hear the word surrender and think it means failure, weakness, or defeat. They imagine giving up, walking away, or losing something important. But in Buddhist wisdom, surrender is not the end. It's the beginning of true awareness. It's not about collapsing or quitting. It's about waking up from the illusion that you were ever in control of everything in the first place. You see, we grow up believing that if we just work hard enough, plan carefully enough, or stress long enough, we can force life to go exactly the way we want. But reality doesn't work that way. Life moves with its own rhythm, its own timing, wisdom, and seasons, and the more we try to force it, the more we suffer. Surrender is not about doing nothing. It's about releasing the emotional resistance. It's about saying, I am done fighting what is. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. You stop trying to control every detail, every person, every outcome. And instead, you open your hands, open your heart, and let life flow through you, just as it was always meant to. In Buddhism, this is the path of liberation. The moment you stop fighting reality is the moment you find peace. You no longer need to control the storm. You simply learn how to sit peacefully in the middle of it. And from that still place, clarity begins to arise. Suddenly, your decisions are no longer reactive. Your actions are no longer based on fear or pressure. You begin to move with wisdom, not panic. You begin to respond, not resist. It's like trying to swim upstream in a wild river. You waste all your energy struggling. You exhaust yourself fighting the current. But when you surrender, when you turn around and let the water carry you, you realize the river was always trying to take you somewhere beautiful. You just needed to stop resisting it. Surrender is not weakness. It is the highest strength. It takes deep courage to stop trying to control everything and instead say, I trust. It is not passivity. It is powerful acceptance. It is not running away. It is standing firmly in the now and saying, this is enough. When you surrender, you begin to see clearly. You awaken from the constant struggle. You realize that peace was never waiting at the finish line. It was always here, in the stillness between each breath, in the silence that follows your letting go. So don't fear surrender. It is not the end of your journey. It is the moment your true journey begins. 3. When you let go, you create space for flow. Imagine your heart as a room, a small, quiet, sacred space inside you. Now imagine it packed wall to wall with fear, anxiety, overthinking, and the weight of everything you're trying to control. There's no room to move, no space to breathe, no place for anything new to enter. This is what happens when we cling tightly to outcomes, when we try to force life to happen exactly the way we planned. We block the natural flow of the universe. But when you begin to let go, you start to clear that room. You open the windows. You remove the clutter. You stop trying to micromanage every detail of life and instead allow something greater to move through you. And in that space you create, life begins to flow. Buddhist teachings remind us again and again that it's not about holding on tighter. It's about loosening your grip. Letting go does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop controlling. You stop carrying the entire weight of the world on your shoulders. You start trusting that some things will work out without your interference. That not everything needs to be fixed, chased, or solved in this moment. Think of a river. It never forces its way forward. It bends around rocks. It flows over obstacles. It moves with patience and power. When you let go, you become like that river. You begin to notice the gentle nudges life gives you, the signs, the subtle shifts, the opportunities hidden in ordinary moments. But you cannot hear these signals when your mind is noisy with control. And here's the beautiful part. Letting go doesn't mean losing everything. It means gaining clarity. When you stop fixating on one narrow outcome, you begin to see all the other doors that were quietly waiting. You begin to receive, not just what you wanted, but what you actually needed. Opportunities start appearing that you never planned for. People enter your life at the perfect time. Solutions arise not from logic, but from intuition and timing. This is the universe flowing through your life, not because you chased it down, but because you stepped aside and allowed it to move. We often forget that the most powerful things in life, healing, love, creativity, inner peace, do not come when we force them. They come when we become available to them. And we become available by letting go of everything that clogs our minds and clutches our hearts. Letting go is not the end of effort. It's the beginning of effortless effort, of aligned action, of moving forward without dragging the heavy burden of fear and control behind you. When you let go, you don't become powerless. You become powerful in a new way. A quiet, calm, centered power that doesn't need to prove anything. A power that trusts life. A power that moves with ease instead of resistance. So ask yourself, what are you holding on to so tightly that you're leaving no room for miracles? Breathe, loosen your grip, and watch how life begins to flow through you, softly, intelligently, perfectly. 4. Trusting the universe is trusting yourself. There is a quiet voice inside you, a calm, knowing presence that isn't shaken by panic or pulled around by fear. It doesn't scream, it doesn't demand, it simply waits for you to return to it. In Buddhism, this inner presence is the seat of awareness, the essence of your being, untouched by external chaos. And to trust the universe is ultimately to trust that part of yourself. Many of us say we want to trust life. We want to believe that things will work out. But deep down, we're afraid. Afraid that if we let go, we'll fall. That if we don't stay in control, something terrible will happen. We think trust is a risk. But what we don't realize is that trying to control everything is far more exhausting, far more painful, and far more uncertain than trust could ever be. When you learn to trust the universe, you're not handing your life over to something random. You're aligning with the deep intelligence that already exists inside you, the same intelligence that knows how to heal a wound, how to breathe without effort, how to grieve and still grow. It's the same intelligence that's been guiding you quietly through every storm, every loss, every breakdown you thought you wouldn't survive. But somehow, you did. You've been guided more times than you realize. But the problem is, we don't listen to that guidance because we're too busy doubting ourselves. We confuse the noise in our head with our true voice. The fear, the what-ifs, the constant questions. What if I fail? What if I choose wrong? What if I lose everything? That noise is not you. It's the protective shell you built around your soul. And the more you feed it, the more you move away from your true self and from the universe itself. Buddhism invites us to come back, to slow down, to watch the mind but not become it, to witness the fear but not follow it, to sit with the unknown, not because you figured it all out, but because you don't need to anymore. When you build this kind of trust, a shift happens inside you. You no longer need to control every outcome because you trust your ability to navigate whatever comes. You stop needing life to go exactly as planned because you trust your resilience. Your intuition strengthens. You stop chasing things that aren't meant for you. You stop trying to fix what was never yours to fix. You begin to live from a quiet confidence, not the loud kind that needs applause, but the sacred kind that comes from alignment, from knowing that no matter what happens, you will return to yourself. And here's what's truly powerful. The universe mirrors that trust. It responds to your energy. When you're panicked and closed, the universe echoes that back. But when you open, when you trust, when you move from peace instead of pressure, you begin to see life responding in ways that feel magical. Not because something outside you changed, but because something within you did. You become a partner with the universe, not its controller, not its victim, a partner. So take a deep breath. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to know how everything will unfold. You just need to remember who you are beneath the noise. The part of you that is steady, spacious, and deeply connected to the rhythm of life. When you trust that part of you, you are already trusting the universe. And the universe, in turn, begins to move in ways that honor your trust, with guidance, with grace, and with perfect timing. 5. The universe answers. Calm, not chaos. Imagine walking into a still lake and tossing in a pebble. The ripple moves gently, in perfect circles, expanding outward with grace. Now imagine throwing a fistful of rocks into that same lake, thrashing the water with panic. The ripples become chaotic. The surface is broken. You can't see the reflection anymore. This is how the universe responds to your energy. When your heart is calm, when your mind is quiet, your life begins to move with clarity. Your intentions ripple out into the world and return with synchronicity. But when your energy is restless, when your thoughts are filled with worry, fear, or impatience, everything becomes muddy. The answers become unclear. The signals get lost in the noise. We often ask, why isn't anything working? Why are my prayers going unanswered? Why do I feel so blocked? The truth is, the universe is not ignoring you. It's simply waiting for you to become still enough to hear it. Buddhism teaches that the quality of your mind determines the quality of your life. When your mind is stormy, full of grasping and urgency, you repel what you're trying to attract, because that energy tells the universe, I'm not ready. I'm afraid. I don't believe. But when you are still, when you let go of the inner noise and return to a state of presence, you shift. In that shift, something subtle but powerful begins to happen. You begin to sense timing more clearly. You become more intuitive, more receptive. You stop forcing and start allowing. And in this space of surrender and silence, the universe begins to whisper back, not with chaos, but with clarity, not with more noise, but with aligned guidance. We're taught in the modern world to be loud, to push harder, to scream our desires into the void. But in Buddhism, it is silence that holds the greatest power. It is the still mind that sees most clearly. It is the quiet heart that receives the most. Think about nature. The sun rises without noise. The moon glows without needing to shout. Flowers do not beg to bloom. They bloom because they are aligned with the rhythm of the earth. They trust. They follow the flow. They exist in harmony with what is. So why do we panic? Why do we believe that the more we chase, the louder we demand, the faster we move, the better our lives will become? Because we forget. We forget that true power is not frantic. It is focused. That clarity doesn't come from doing more. It comes from doing less, with presence. That the answers we seek are often waiting in the quiet spaces between our thoughts. If you're constantly rushing from one worry to the next, life becomes a blur. You miss the signs. You overlook the openings. You move so fast that the doors of opportunity open and close before you even see them. But when you slow down, when you sit with yourself, when you breathe deeply and soften your expectations, you begin to return to your natural state, a state of awareness, of gentle strength, of peace. And the universe responds to that. You'll start noticing small alignments, an idea that feels just right, a person who shows up unexpectedly, a solution that appears without force. This is not a coincidence. This is a reflection of your inner state. Because the universe is not separate from you. It's not outside of you, judging your worthiness. It moves through you, it responds to you, and it speaks in a language that only calm can hear. So if you feel stuck, overwhelmed, or unheard, don't do more. Be still more. Return to your breath. Release the tension in your jaw. Feel your feet on the earth. Let your thoughts come and go without chasing them. Let your emotions rise and fall without drowning in them. Become like the still lake, because when you are calm, you are powerful. And in that power, the universe finally has space to respond, not with chaos, but with the gentle unfolding of everything meant for you. 5. The universe answers. Calm, not chaos. The universe is not deaf, nor is it blind. It is constantly listening, more closely than you realize. But it does not respond to panic, to noise, or to desperation. It responds to your vibration, your state of being, your inner stillness. When you approach life with fear in your voice and anxiety in your heart, The universe hears that chaos and mirrors it right back to you. Not to punish you, but to show you what you're carrying. Think of the mind as a pond. When the surface is disturbed, rippled by fear, by rushing, by inner storms, you cannot see clearly beneath the water. The truth, the guidance, the path forward is hidden. But when you calm the waters, when you allow the chaos to settle without reacting to it, the surface becomes like a mirror. Everything becomes clear. The answers rise to the top, not because you forced them, but because you created space for them to appear. This is what Buddhism gently teaches us again and again. Calm is not a weakness. It is your gateway to wisdom. In our modern world, we are taught that noise is power, that action must always be aggressive, that louder voices win and faster movement leads to faster success. But the Dharma shows us something far more profound. Real power is quiet. Real alignment is still, and real movement often begins with no movement at all. When your energy is frantic, you may still attract results, but they will be misaligned. You may get what you want, but not in a way that brings peace. You may achieve your goals, but at the cost of your well-being, because the path you took was rooted in fear, in urgency, in mistrust. But when your energy is calm, something sacred happens. You begin to attract not just outcomes, but outcomes that nourish you. Not just progress, but peace along the way. You begin to walk with clarity instead of confusion. You begin to act with confidence instead of control. And that is when the universe starts flowing in your favor, not through struggle, but through synchronicity. The Buddha never taught us to beg for peace. He taught us to become peace. Not to demand change, but to become so still that we ourselves become the change. And it is from that place of stillness that life begins to move again, not from ego, but from the energy of deep alignment. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you truly slowed down? When was the last time you sat in silence, not scrolling, not planning, not worrying, but just being? In those rare, quiet moments, you may notice something. Your breath becomes more noticeable, your shoulders relax, your heartbeat softens, and something deeper awakens inside you, something that was there all along, waiting beneath the surface noise. That is the space where the universe whispers back. The truth is, the answers we're so desperate to find don't live in more thinking. They don't live in over-analyzing, in controlling, or in pushing harder. They live in the spaces between our thoughts, in the pauses, in the quiet hours, in the stillness that we so often run from. When you are calm, your mind becomes a tuning fork for clarity. You begin to sense things you never saw before, a small sign, a quiet nudge, a gut feeling that leads you in the right direction. These are not accidents, these are answers, but they only rise to the surface when the chaos has been quieted. It's not that you should never act, but when you act from calm, your actions are rooted in wisdom, not fear. They are clear, not cluttered. You don't move just to feel productive. You move because you know it's time. You don't speak just to be heard. You speak because your words now carry peace. And the universe responds. The right people begin to notice you, not because you shouted, but because your calm presence draws them in. The right opportunities begin to arise, not because you chased them down, but because your stillness made space for them to appear. And what once felt far away now feels like it's been gently moving toward you all along. This is not magic. This is alignment. In Buddhism, this state is often described as equanimity, a balanced, calm awareness that allows you to remain centered no matter what is happening around you. When you cultivate this inner calm, you begin to operate from your true self. Not the self that is anxious, reactive, or constantly proving, but the self that is already whole, already wise, already in tune with the greater rhythm of life. From that place, life becomes less about chasing and more about receiving, less about forcing and more about flowing. You realize that many of the things you were running toward were never meant to be caught, but to be invited gently with presence. So if your life feels chaotic, if your efforts feel wasted, if your voice feels unheard, don't get louder, don't move faster, don't push harder, get still. Sit with yourself, breathe deeply, place one hand on your heart and the other on your belly, and feel the quiet wisdom already living inside you, the peace that needs no explanation, the guidance that needs no words. Let that calm energy expand within you, and then watch how the universe begins to respond. Because the universe does not need you to be perfect. It needs you to be present, and presence only arises from calm. 6. Life was never meant to be forced. Look closely at the natural world. Watch how a flower blooms, not with force, not with rush. It unfolds gently, one petal at a time, guided by sunlight and time. Watch how rivers carve their path, not by battling the rocks in their way, but by flowing around them. The moon does not struggle to rise, nor does the sun demand the sky to make way. Everything in nature has its rhythm, its pace, its moment. Nothing hurries, and yet everything is accomplished. So why then do we humans rush so much? Why do we believe that if we don't force life to happen, it will abandon us? Why do we wake up already tense, already planning, already pressuring ourselves to achieve, to solve, to figure everything out immediately? The truth is, we've been taught a lie, that forcing equals power, that control equals success, that if we stop pushing, everything will fall apart. But Buddhism reveals a different truth, one that is softer, wiser, and far more real. Life was never meant to be forced. When you force something, a relationship, a decision, a dream, you strip it of its natural flow. You take something that was meant to grow organically and you smother it with expectations, with anxiety, with pressure, and the more you push, the more resistance you create. Think of a tight knot. The more you pull at it aggressively, the tighter it becomes. But when you breathe, when you loosen your grip and gently work with it, it slowly begins to unravel. This is how life responds to your energy. When you soften, life softens. When you rush, life resists. We often say, "I have to make this happen." But in doing so, we forget that life is a co-creation. It's not just about what you do, it's about how you do it. The energy you bring to your efforts matters. When your actions come from desperation, they carry tension. When they come from presence, they carry peace. One builds pressure, the other builds trust. Sometimes, the reason something isn't working isn't because it's not meant for you, but because you're forcing it at the wrong time. You're trying to open a door that's not ready. You're trying to plant seeds in frozen soil, and when it doesn't go your way, you blame yourself. You think you failed, but you didn't fail. You just tried to rush a season that wasn't yours yet. Buddhism teaches us the beauty of non-resistance, not as passivity, but as profound wisdom. Non-resistance doesn't mean you do nothing. It means you stop fighting what already is. You stop arguing with the present moment. You stop trying to bend life to your will, and instead, you begin to listen to it. When you live this way, you begin to feel more peace, even when things aren't perfect. You learn to move with life, not against it. You begin to trust the pauses, the delays, the detours. You begin to understand that just because something isn't happening right now doesn't mean it never will. It might just mean you're being prepared, that the pieces are still falling into place, that the soil is still being made fertile for your growth. This doesn't mean you give up on your dreams. It means you hold them with open hands, not clenched fists. It means you take aligned action, not frantic motion. It means you trust that what is meant for you will not require you to destroy your peace to reach it. Because true success, true fulfillment, doesn't feel like tension. It feels like flow. It feels like returning to yourself, not abandoning yourself. It feels like effort, yes, but effort without suffering, action without obsession, intention without anxiety. There's a kind of sacred timing to everything, the relationship, the healing, the clarity, the opportunity, the transformation. It all arrives when your inner state matches the vibration of what you're asking for. And you can't reach that inner state by forcing. You reach it by aligning, by softening, by letting go of the belief that life owes you anything, and instead becoming grateful for every moment it gives you. So pause. Right now. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, what am I forcing in my life? Is it a conversation you're trying to control? A job that drains your soul but you keep pushing through? A future that you're trying to plan to the last detail even though it keeps changing? Let it go. Not because you don't care, but because you're learning to trust. Letting go is not laziness, it's clarity. It means you're strong enough to stop fighting what you cannot change, and wise enough to move where life is guiding you. When you surrender the need to force things, you give yourself permission to rest. You allow your nervous system to settle. You allow your heart to open. And from this state of inner calm, you make decisions that are clearer, kinder, wiser. And most importantly, you allow the universe to do its part. Because it's not all on you. It never was. You are not the sole architect of your destiny. You are in collaboration with something greater. Call it the Tao, the flow, the divine, the Dharma, the universe. When you try to do it all alone, you become heavy. But when you relax into trust, you begin to feel carried, supported, held. So take this moment to breathe, to soften your timeline, to stop demanding life be something it's not yet ready to be. Watch how, when you relax your grip, life begins to flow again, not around you, but through you. You don't need to force what's already yours. You just need to become calm enough to receive it. 7. True power comes from inner stillness. For most of the world, this word brings to mind strength, speed, control, dominance. People associate it with being loud, fast, assertive, moving quickly, achieving more, always pushing forward. But Buddhism teaches us something radically different, something quietly revolutionary, that true power does not shout. It whispers. It doesn't come from external control. It comes from internal stillness. And this stillness is not just silence, it is presence. It is the kind of presence that doesn't react to every insult, every emotion, every changing circumstance. It is the stillness of the mountain that remains unmoved, even as the storm howls around it. The stillness of the moon that quietly lights the night without demanding anything in return. The stillness of a deep lake that reflects the sky only when its waters are calm. This is the stillness that Buddhism asks us to return to, not just once, but again and again. Because in stillness, we don't lose ourselves, we find ourselves. In the chaos of modern life, stillness is rare. We are taught to react, to explain, to prove. We're conditioned to respond instantly to messages, to defend our opinions, to always be doing something. If we are still for too long, we fear we're falling behind. But what if falling still is exactly what we need to get ahead? Not in the eyes of the world, but in the journey of the soul. Because when you are still, you hear things you never noticed before, not from others, but from within. You begin to see where your energy has been leaking. You recognize the stories you've been telling yourself. You finally meet the version of you that isn't performing for anyone. And in that meeting, you discover your deepest truth. You don't need to control everything to feel powerful. You only need to be present. This presence, this unshakable stillness, is not something you chase. You cultivate it through breath, through awareness, through letting go of the urge to constantly respond. You find it in meditation, in nature, in the quiet pause before you speak. And once you find it, everything around you begins to change. Because stillness does not mean inaction. It means right action. It means moving from wisdom instead of impulse. It means making decisions not because you're scared of what might happen, but because you're aligned with what feels right. It means showing up not to fix everything, but to honor what truly matters. Think about the last time you reacted from panic. How did that feel? How did that end? Now think about a time you paused, breathed, waited. A time you didn't respond right away, but gave space for clarity to emerge. That moment of stillness, that was your power. Buddhism teaches us that in stillness we return to our original nature, a nature that is not rushed, not anxious, not angry, but deeply rooted, unmoved, aware. The Buddha himself was not a warrior in the traditional sense, but he carried a power that transcended physical strength. His power came not from shouting down opponents, but from his ability to remain unmoved, to sit in the face of temptation, to watch the storms of his own mind pass without clinging to them. This is the essence of power, not dominance over others, but mastery over self. And this mastery is not cold or rigid. It is gentle. It is compassionate. Because when you're still inside, you stop projecting your pain onto others. You stop needing to win every argument. You stop taking things personally. You no longer act out of fear. You act from a place of groundedness, of wisdom, of peace. Stillness allows you to see things clearly. You no longer view the world through the lens of your past pain or future worries. You see what is, not just what your mind wants to see. You begin to understand people, not just react to them. You listen, not to reply, but to understand. And in doing so, your relationships begin to heal. Your energy becomes magnetic. People feel your calm. They trust it. Because in a world full of noise, stillness feels like home. But cultivating stillness is a practice. It requires discipline, not the rigid kind, but the kind that honors the present moment. It means choosing not to check your phone every 5 minutes, choosing to sit with your thoughts rather than drown them in distraction, choosing to breathe when your heart wants to race, choosing to pause before you speak words you'll regret, choosing to forgive instead of feed your anger. These small choices, they are acts of tremendous power. In Buddhism, the path to awakening is often described not as a sprint, but as a slow return. A return to what has always been within you, hidden beneath the layers of noise, trauma, fear, and expectation. Each moment of stillness peels back one of those layers. Each breath taken in presence brings you one step closer to your true self. And when you live from that self, you become unshakable. The storms may still come, people may still misunderstand you, life may still challenge you, but inside, you remain steady. You stop being pulled by every opinion, every doubt, every wave of emotion. You learn to sit, to wait, to listen until the right path reveals itself. This doesn't mean life becomes perfect, but it becomes clearer, lighter, more sacred. Because your energy is no longer scattered, it's focused, intentional, whole. And from that energy, the universe responds. Not with noise, but with synchronicity. Not with chaos, but with flow. Not with pressure, but with purpose. You'll find that what once seemed far away begins to move toward you, not because you chased it, but because you became ready to receive it. You aligned yourself with peace. And peace is the most powerful frequency in the universe. So if you feel lost, rushed, overwhelmed, or powerless, stop running, stop proving, stop pushing. Sit, breathe, return to yourself. Because within you is a place so quiet, so deep, so wise, that no storm can touch it. And from that stillness, everything you've been seeking will begin to find you, not because you forced it, but because you remembered who you truly are. You are not weak for being calm. You are not behind for being slow. You are not lost for being still. You are powerful because you are present, and presence is the doorway to every miracle the universe has been waiting to give you. 8. The moment you stop resisting, healing begins. We live much of our lives in resistance, not always knowingly, but deeply, subtly, constantly. We resist pain. We resist change. We resist uncertainty. We resist the emotions that rise up inside us, the truths we're afraid to face, and even the present moment itself. And yet, this resistance, this invisible wall we build between ourselves and what is, becomes the very thing that deepens our suffering and delays our healing. In Buddhism, suffering is not always about what happens to us. It is often about our reaction to what happens, our inability to accept it, to hold space for it, to allow it to move through us rather than fight against it. And this is where most of us get stuck. We believe that if we resist what we don't like, if we mentally and emotionally push it away, we can protect ourselves. But in truth, the more we resist, the more tightly we hold on to the very thing we're trying to escape. Resistance becomes a trap, and only when we let go, only when we stop resisting, does the process of true healing begin. Imagine holding a ball underwater. The more forcefully you push it down, the more energy you use, the more unstable it becomes. Eventually, it slips from your grasp and shoots to the surface with even more power. This is how suppressed pain behaves. When we resist grief, sadness, anxiety, or anger, when we try to bury them, they do not disappear. They build pressure inside us, turning into chronic stress, bitterness, numbness, and even illness. But when we release our grip, when we allow the pain to surface, to breathe, to exist without judgment, it begins to lose its power. We begin to heal. To stop resisting does not mean to give up. It does not mean to welcome pain with open arms. It means to stop running, to stop tightening your body every time discomfort arises, to stop turning away from your inner experience and instead turn gently toward it, to say, yes, this hurts. Yes, I don't have the answers, but I am here. I will stay. This staying is sacred. It is the root of all transformation. When you stay present with your pain, with your discomfort, with your confusion, you begin to create space around it. You no longer fuse with it. You no longer become it. You are simply the witness, and in that witnessing, in that allowing, healing happens, not through control, but through compassion. Buddhist wisdom shows us that all things, even the most painful, are impermanent. Emotions rise and fall like waves. No feeling, no matter how heavy, is final. But when we resist these emotions, when we panic, avoid, or suppress, we prolong their stay. We freeze them in place. We attach to them with fear, and they attach to us in return. Yet, when we open ourselves to the natural rhythm of experience, when we let the sadness come, let the anger burn, let the fear tremble, without judgment or escape, we allow it to complete its cycle. We allow it to move through us like wind through trees, like rain through soil, and when it passes, we are lighter. This is the beginning of emotional freedom, not found in control, but in surrender. But this surrender does not come easily. It goes against everything the ego has been taught. The ego believes strength lies in resistance. It tells us that to feel pain is to be weak, that to admit fear is to be broken, that to slow down and feel is to fall apart. And yet, Buddhism teaches the opposite, that true strength is in the ability to feel without falling, to soften without breaking, to sit in the fire of life and still know peace within. This path of non-resistance is not passive. It is courageous. It is an act of profound bravery to feel deeply in a world that tells you to numb, to stay grounded when everything inside you wants to escape, to breathe into the places that hurt instead of pushing them away. Every time you choose to be present with what is, you reclaim a piece of yourself. You bring awareness to wounds that have long been hidden. You bring warmth to the cold, forgotten parts of your being. And slowly, piece by piece, you begin to return to wholeness, not because you fixed everything, but because you finally allowed yourself to feel everything. Healing, then, is not a destination. It is a practice of allowing. It is the daily decision to stop resisting life and start participating in it fully, to sit with your sadness like a friend, to greet your fear with curiosity instead of shame, to see your anxiety not as a flaw, but as a signal that something inside you needs your attention, your love, your breath. And the more you practice this being with, instead of fighting against, the more resilient you become. Not hardened, but softer, stronger, not because you never break, but because you no longer fear breaking. Because you've seen that even in your most fragile moments, you are still here, you are still whole. Stillness plays a vital role in this process. When you are still, you begin to notice the resistance you carry in your body, the tension in your shoulders, the clenching in your jaw, the shallow breaths that barely reach your belly. You begin to see how much energy is spent holding everything together, and in that awareness, you're given a choice to continue resisting or to let go. Letting go is not a one-time decision. It is a moment-by-moment surrender. It is catching yourself when you begin to spiral into control and choosing instead to soften, to exhale, to trust that you are safe enough, strong enough, whole enough to let life unfold. And in doing so, you begin to feel again, not just the pain, but the beauty, the softness of the breeze, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the quiet joy of being alive, even in imperfection. You realize that life was never meant to be controlled. It was meant to be experienced. So if you are tired, if you are aching, if you feel like you've been carrying the weight of your world for too long, pause. Place your hand on your heart. Feel its rhythm. It is still beating, even in your hardest moments. Let that be enough. You don't need to fix everything today. You don't need to have all the answers. You only need to stop fighting what is and begin listening to what life is trying to show you through it. Because the moment you stop resisting, the moment you say, "I will meet myself here," is the moment healing begins. Quietly, gently, not all at once, but steadily, like the sun rising after a long night, like a wound closing, not with force, but with time and tenderness. And in that healing, you will remember the most powerful truth of all, that peace was never outside you. It was always waiting within you, just beyond the wall of resistance, in the quiet, sacred space of your acceptance. 9. The art of flowing with life, letting life lead without losing yourself. There is a river that runs beneath all things. You cannot see it, yet you can feel it. It is not a river of water, but of energy, of movement, of rhythm. It carries the seasons, the winds, the growth of forests, the shifting of clouds, the rise and fall of your breath. It moves silently through the trees, beneath your skin, within your thoughts, and beyond your control. This is the flow of life. Not the life you plan, but the life that is always unfolding in every moment, with or without your permission. And the greatest peace, the deepest healing, and the most profound wisdom often emerge not from controlling this river, but from learning how to flow with it. Most people live their lives trying to swim against the current, trying to push against the tide, trying to force things to happen in the way they think they must. They fight the pace of life, the changes, the delays, the losses, the unknowns. And in doing so, they grow tired, not just physically, but spiritually. They begin to believe that life is a constant battle, that success is about resistance, that happiness must be pursued, captured, or conquered. But the ancient teachings of Buddhism tell us something radically different. That peace is not found in overpowering life. It is found in allowing it, in flowing with it, in recognizing that there is a larger intelligence, a sacred rhythm, a dharma at work that is far more profound than anything your limited mind could ever predict or plan. This is not about passivity. It is about wisdom. It is not about giving up your power. It is about realizing where your true power lies, Because true power does not come from clenching your fists and holding on to what is crumbling. It comes from opening your hands and trusting what is becoming. True power is not in constantly doing, but in being deeply present with whatever arises. It is in allowing life to lead while you remain rooted in your own awareness. To flow with life means to stop treating every moment as an obstacle to be overcome. It means no longer demanding that every situation match your expectations. It means looking at what is happening right now, not with resistance, but with reverence. Not with panic, but with presence. Think of water. When it meets a rock, it does not stop. It does not fight. It bends. It moves. It adapts. And yet, in time, it carves canyons. It shapes mountains. It creates paths where none existed before. This is the quiet strength of those who flow with life. They are not weak. They are not passive. They are simply aligned. They do not cling to what was or chase what isn't. They meet each moment fully as it is and respond from a place of calm knowing. But flowing does not mean you will always feel comfortable. It does not mean you will always get what you want. Sometimes life will take you in directions you didn't plan. It will ask you to let go of people you thought would stay. It will strip you of identities you were proud of. It will close doors without warning. And in those moments, your ego will want to resist. It will want to scream, to grasp, to demand answers. But the soul knows better. The soul knows that change is not chaos. It is choreography. To flow with life is to trust that even the painful moments have purpose, that even the heartbreaks are holy, that sometimes the delay is protection, sometimes the no is divine mercy, sometimes the loss is a quiet doorway into something more true, more aligned, more whole. But you can only see this when you stop resisting. You can only feel this when you stop trying to rewrite the present. It is a radical act of self-love to say, I may not understand why this is happening, but I will trust that it is happening for me, not to punish me, but to prepare me. This is the heart of surrender, not giving up, but giving over, not collapsing, but cooperating with life's greater unfolding. And in that surrender, something beautiful begins to happen. You become lighter, your breath deepens, your body relaxes, your mind quiets. You stop living in survival mode. You stop trying to force every outcome. You stop blaming yourself for not being able to control the uncontrollable. You start to feel held, not by circumstances, but by something deeper, by the flow itself. This flow is not separate from you. It is not a force outside of you that drags you around. It is within you. It is your intuition, your inner compass, your deep knowing that whispers when something feels right and when it doesn't. When you are still enough to hear this voice, you begin to move differently. You no longer push. You follow. You no longer force. You align. You no longer question your worth based on your outcomes, because you understand that your worth is rooted in your being, not in your doing. And so, you begin to walk more gently through life. You trust that what is meant for you will never pass you by. You no longer chase. You attract by becoming. You no longer panic. You pause. You listen. You move only when it feels true, not when the world demands it, but when your soul invites it. This kind of living is not easy at first. It requires unlearning. It requires you to step away from the noise, the expectations, the timelines imposed by society. It requires deep patience, deep faith, deep humility. But in return, it gives you something far more valuable than control. It gives you peace. Peace that doesn't depend on outcomes. Peace that remains steady even when plans change. Peace that carries you through the storms because you're no longer fighting the wind. You're learning how to sail with it. So what does it look like in everyday life to flow? It means waking up and checking in with your breath before your phone. It means allowing yourself to rest when your body is tired, even if your to-do list is long. It means saying no when something doesn't feel aligned, even if people expect a yes. It means choosing presence over productivity, sincerity over speed, meaning over momentum. It means listening to the whispers of your heart, not just the shouts of your fear. It means trusting that you don't have to have it all figured out to take the next step. It means making room for mystery, for grace, for magic. And it means letting go, not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know that what is meant to stay will never need to be forced. In Buddhism, the ultimate goal is not to control life, but to be liberated from the illusion that you ever needed to. Liberation comes when you stop clinging to the past, stop fearing the future, and fully arrive in the now, meeting life not as an enemy, but as a sacred partner. So let this moment be your invitation. Let this be the breath where you release your grip, where you soften your gaze, where you stop trying to swim upstream and allow yourself to float. You are not lost. You are not late. You are not broken. You are simply being called to trust again, to feel again, to flow again. Because life is not something to conquer. It is something to dance with. And the moment you stop resisting its rhythm is the moment you begin to move with grace. Let life lead you. And while it leads, never forget, your stillness is your anchor, your awareness is your guide, your softness is your strength, and your willingness to flow is the quiet doorway to your highest path. 10th, letting go of control, trusting the space between desires and outcomes. There is a sacred space that most people overlook. It exists between the moment you set your intention and the moment it comes to life, between the seed and the fruit, between the prayer and the answer, between the letting go and the arrival. This space is not empty. It is not a void to be feared. It is the very heart of the journey. But most people miss its beauty because they spend this space trying to control what cannot be controlled. In Buddhism, the desire to control is one of the most deeply rooted causes of suffering, not because control is inherently wrong, but because it is a symptom of fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of being hurt again, fear of not being enough if life doesn't turn out exactly the way we planned. And so we grasp, tighten, plan, predict, manage, obsess. We try to force life to conform to our expectations, believing that safety lies in predictability. But in truth, control is an illusion. And the tighter we hold on, the more disconnected we become from the flow of life itself. Letting go of control is not about giving up on your life. It is not about becoming passive or indifferent. It is about trusting a higher wisdom. It is about making peace with uncertainty. It is about surrendering not to failure, but to the unfolding mystery that has always known more than your mind ever could. And it is in this surrender that the real magic of life begins. When you let go of control, you do not stop caring, you simply stop fearing. You do not stop acting, you simply stop forcing. You no longer micromanage the outcome, you focus on showing up fully for the process. You still have intentions, but you no longer demand that the universe follow your script. You allow things to happen in their own time, in their own way, trusting that what is truly meant for you cannot miss you. This kind of trust is not easy to build. It asks you to walk into the fog of the unknown with your eyes wide open, to take a step even when you cannot see the full path, to breathe deeply even when the outcome feels uncertain. But in return, it gives you a kind of inner peace that no amount of control can ever offer. Because true peace is not found in perfect circumstances. It is found in your relationship to those circumstances. To live without the need to control is to begin living in the present moment, not as a strategy, but as a sanctuary. You are no longer attached to how things should be. You are no longer living in the future, waiting for life to begin. You begin to see that this moment, as imperfect as it may seem, is still full of potential, still full of beauty, still alive. When we control, we narrow the possibilities. We cling to only one outcome, but when we trust, we open ourselves to something greater, something more aligned, more expansive, more alive than what we had originally imagined. Many people never experience this beauty because they are too busy chasing what they think they need, too busy managing every detail, too afraid to let go of their timeline. But Buddhism teaches that when you let go of the attachment to specific outcomes, you create space for the unexpected. And often, the unexpected is where the soul is truly nourished. Letting go of control also changes how you relate to pain. When something doesn't go your way, instead of falling apart, you pause, you reflect, you breathe, you ask, what is life trying to teach me here? What part of me is being asked to grow? You stop seeing difficulty as punishment and start seeing it as refinement, as a sacred shaping, as a way life brings you closer to your true path, not by giving you what you want, but by clearing away what you don't need. This shift from control to trust changes everything. You become less reactive, less rigid, less afraid. You stop needing constant validation and reassurance. You stop obsessing over how things look and focus more on how things feel. You stop comparing your path to others because you trust that your journey is unique, sacred, and unfolding in its own perfect timing. There is a kind of strength that is born in this space, a quiet, rooted strength that does not waver in the face of delay, rejection, or uncertainty. It is not the strength of force, but the strength of surrender, the strength of knowing who you are, even when life feels uncertain, the strength of trusting what is unseen, the strength of becoming unshakable, not by controlling the world, but by mastering your response to it. Stillness becomes your teacher, patience becomes your friend, presence becomes your way of life. You no longer rush, you no longer chase. You move with intention, but not urgency. You act, but you don't cling. You live with vision, but without obsession. And when fear does arise, as it inevitably will, you no longer let it take the wheel. You see it, you breathe into it, you remind yourself, I can be afraid and still trust. I can feel uncertain and still take the next step. I can let go and still be held. In Buddhism, this is the path of the middle way, not clinging, not resisting, but flowing. It is the path of non-attachment, not detachment, but a heart wide open, willing to love, to lose, to begin again, without the need to control the outcome. It is the path of compassion for others, yes, but especially for yourself. Because when you no longer measure your worth by what you can control, you begin to see your inherent value. You begin to soften, to forgive, to return home to yourself. Control often disguises itself as discipline, as ambition, as strength. But underneath it is often fear. And fear, when unexamined, runs our lives quietly. It keeps us in cycles of tension, of trying, of never feeling like enough. But when we bring awareness to that fear, when we sit with it instead of feeding it, we begin to see it clearly, and once seen, it begins to loosen its grip. You start to realize, I don't need to know everything to take the next step. I don't need to predict the future to be safe. I don't need to control every detail to be at peace. Letting go of control is not something you do once. It is a daily practice, 1,000 small moments of choosing trust over tension, of breathing instead of panicking, of listening instead of demanding. And slowly, you begin to feel the shift. You begin to feel held, not by certainty, but by presence, not by plans, but by peace. This is how healing happens, not when life becomes perfect, but when you stop trying to force it to be. When you trust that what is for you will come, not through striving, but through alignment, through showing up again and again, with an open heart, a clear mind, and the willingness to be shaped by life, not just sheltered from it. So if you feel exhausted from trying to manage it all, if you feel anxious because life isn't going according to plan, if you feel like you're falling behind, pause, breathe, let go. Not because it's easy, but because it's time. Because something deeper is calling you, not to give up, but to surrender, not to be passive, but to become receptive, not to control the flow of life, but to finally feel it. Letting go is not weakness, it is wisdom. And in that wisdom, you will find a peace that control could never give you. You will find your way, not by forcing life, but by flowing with it. 11. Freedom begins when you stop needing to be understood. There is a moment in every soul's journey when the desire to be seen, known, and understood becomes too heavy to carry. Not because it is wrong to want connection, but because constantly needing validation from the outside world builds a prison around the spirit. A silent, suffocating prison made not of stone, but of expectation. And within those walls, we begin to lose ourselves. We begin to shape our words, our choices, our very identities based on who will understand us, who will approve, who will agree. But freedom, the kind of freedom that leaves you light and whole, does not begin with being understood by others. It begins with no longer needing to be. In the teachings of Buddhism, we are reminded to release our attachment to the ego's cravings, and one of its most deeply rooted cravings is this: the need to be understood. We want people to see our hearts, to know our intentions, to validate our pain, to confirm that we are worthy, that we are right, that we are enough. And for a time, this desire seems natural. After all, we are wired for connection. We long to be known. We want to belong. But the problem is not in the desire itself, it is in the attachment to it. When your sense of peace depends on others understanding your every word, your every wound, your every truth, you place your soul in their hands. You become reactive, defensive, exhausted. You find yourself explaining things that don't need to be explained. You shape your message so it won't offend. You shrink parts of your truth so it will fit into someone else's framework. You say yes when you mean no, or no when you mean yes, just to avoid being misunderstood. And over time, this fractures you, not all at once, but slowly, quietly, like a house with invisible cracks in its foundation, until one day you realize you no longer feel at home within yourself. But what if you let go of the need to be understood? What if you gave yourself permission to speak your truth without needing everyone to accept it? What if you allowed your path to be your own, even if no one else could see where it was leading? This is not rebellion. It is not coldness. It is liberation. It is a sacred returning. It is a conscious choice to root yourself not in how others perceive you, but in how deeply you know yourself. And from this knowing, a different kind of peace arises, not the peace of being agreed with, but the peace of no longer requiring it. When you no longer need to be understood, something inside you relaxes. The tight grip around your identity begins to loosen. You start to see that other people's confusion about you is not a threat. It is not your burden to fix. Their misunderstanding is not a reflection of your failure. It is a reflection of their lens, their journey, their conditioning, their inner world. And in that realization, you begin to let go. You begin to speak more clearly, not to convince, but to express. You begin to act more freely, not for applause, but for alignment. You begin to live more honestly, not to be liked, but to be real. And ironically, the less you try to be understood, the more deeply others begin to feel your authenticity. Not all people, but the right people. The people who are meant to walk with you will find you, not because you molded yourself to fit them, but because you stayed true to your path long enough for them to recognize it. Buddhism teaches us to turn inward, to observe the self without judgment, to be still in the face of confusion, to remain equanimous when others misunderstand us. This is not indifference, it is clarity. It is choosing not to waste energy defending a truth that needs no defense. Because truth, when lived deeply, begins to speak for itself, not in arguments, but in presence, in steadiness, in peace. You are not here to be everyone's mirror. You are not here to make sense to every mind you meet. You are here to live fully, to love deeply, to awaken gently. And that journey will often not be understood, not even by the people closest to you. And that is okay. You will outgrow people. You will be misjudged. You will take steps others wouldn't take. You will make choices that don't make sense from the outside. But as long as they make sense within your heart, as long as they are rooted in truth, in compassion, in authenticity, then they are valid. They are enough. You are enough. And here is the beauty of this path. When you stop needing to be understood, you create space to understand others more. You no longer listen just to reply or defend. You listen to truly hear. You become less reactive and more curious. You begin to realize that everyone is carrying their own invisible battles, and not being understood by them is not a personal attack. It is simply a reflection of their own inner noise. From this space, compassion grows. Boundaries grow too, not the rigid walls of resentment, but the soft, clear lines of self-respect. You begin to protect your energy, not out of fear, but out of reverence for your peace. You stop over-explaining. You stop chasing closure from those who never truly saw you. You stop trying to justify your joy, your pain, your purpose. Because you understand now, no one else needs to validate your experience for it to be real. Letting go of the need to be understood also frees your creativity. You no longer filter your art, your ideas, your expression through the lens of public approval. You no longer wait for the perfect moment to share what's in your heart. You simply offer what is true and let the world receive it how it will. Some will resonate, some will resist, some will ignore, and none of it will change your truth. In Buddhism, there is a deep respect for silence, not as absence, but as presence. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to say nothing, to let your energy speak louder than your words, to walk away instead of argue, to choose your peace over being right. When you stop needing to be understood, you begin to experience life differently. You wake up with a little more softness. You move through challenges with a little more grace. You realize that not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. Not every judgment needs to be answered. Not every rejection needs to be mourned. Instead, you return to yourself again and again. You anchor into your breath. You sit with your feelings. You trust that your path is unfolding, even if others cannot see the map. You are not here to be decoded. You are here to be lived. You are not a puzzle to be solved. You are a soul to be honored. You are not meant to fit into every room. You are meant to find the spaces where your truth can breathe. So give yourself permission to stop chasing validation, to stop shrinking your light just to make others comfortable, to stop bending your truth just to be seen. Instead, choose to stand in your wholeness, even if it means standing alone for a while. Because in time, you will find that the people who truly matter are not the ones who understand every word, but the ones who feel your heart, even in your silence. And more importantly, you will feel yourself, fully, clearly, lovingly, not because others finally understand you, but because you no longer need them to. You have chosen peace, and in that peace, you are free. The peace you seek is in the space you're afraid to enter. Most people spend their entire lives searching for peace without realizing that they are running from the very thing that offers it. Not peace as a concept, not peace as a fleeting moment of calm between two storms, but the deep, abiding, still peace that does not rise and fall with conditions. The peace that stays even when life doesn't go your way. The peace that breathes with you in heartbreak, in uncertainty, in change. This kind of peace cannot be found by adding more. It cannot be reached through endless doing, acquiring, achieving. It is not something outside of you waiting to be discovered. It lives in the quietest part of you, the space you often avoid. It lives in the silence you fear, in the solitude you avoid, in the pause you never take, in the uncomfortable emotion you push away. It lives in the now, beneath the noise, behind the masks, beneath the tension. It waits in the very place you resist. And until you are willing to enter that space, peace will always feel like a distant hope instead of a lived experience. Buddhism teaches us that the very act of seeking often prevents us from seeing, that striving, when unexamined, becomes suffering, that most of the things we chase, success, recognition, love, control, are substitutes for the stillness we've lost contact with. We think peace will come after we fix everything, after we understand everything, after we are healed, validated, admired. But real peace begins not after, it begins here. Not when things are perfect, but when we stop needing them to be. Yet this truth is hard to accept, because entering the space where peace truly lives means coming face to face with what we've been trying to outrun. Our pain, our unprocessed grief, our regrets, our loneliness, our unspoken fears. It means turning toward the silence we find unbearable. It means sitting in stillness, not to escape, but to listen. And that's why most people keep moving. They fill their schedules, their minds, their relationships with distraction, not because they are unmotivated or lazy or indifferent, but because they are afraid of what will rise when everything else falls away. But here's the paradox. Peace does not rise until the noise falls. Stillness cannot be heard in chaos. Truth cannot be known in avoidance. So the very space you avoid is the threshold you must cross. Not all at once, not with force, but slowly, gently, intentionally. With each breath, you step closer. With each pause, you soften. With each act of courage, choosing silence over reaction, solitude over escape, awareness over avoidance, you begin to remember. You remember that you are not your thoughts. You remember that emotions are not to be feared, but to be felt. You remember that presence is not something you achieve. It is something you return to. And in that return, you begin to notice things you've forgotten how to see. You notice the way the air feels against your skin. You notice the weight in your chest that finally begins to lift. You notice the tightness in your body slowly releasing. You notice the still, calm voice within you that says, "You are safe, you are held, you can stop running now." This voice does not speak in grand declarations. It does not demand attention. It waits patiently in the space between your thoughts. It speaks only when you are quiet enough to hear it. And when you do hear it, something in you shifts, not dramatically but deeply, not loudly but permanently. Because that voice is your original nature, your true self, the part of you that has always known how to rest in the moment, that does not need permission to exist, that does not live in fear or regret or projection, that lives only in now. Buddhist wisdom reminds us again and again, all things arise and pass away. Nothing is permanent. And yet, we build our identities on the things that change. Our roles, our status, our stories, our relationships, our ideas of who we are supposed to be. We attach, we cling, we build our sense of safety on sand. And when the inevitable waves come, loss, disappointment, uncertainty, we panic, we grasp, we suffer. But when you enter that space of stillness within you, the one that does not depend on external conditions, you begin to build a different kind of foundation. One that does not shake when the world shifts. One that does not break when people misunderstand you. One that remains steady even when your mind is not. Because you have anchored yourself in something deeper. This inner stillness is not empty. It is full. Full of clarity, of compassion, of resilience. It is not numb, it is deeply alive. It allows you to feel without being consumed, to grieve without being drowned, to love without being lost. It is the ground beneath your feet when everything else disappears, and it is always here, always waiting, always available. But to live from this space, you must stop trying to earn peace. You must stop trying to find it in future circumstances. You must begin to enter the space that frightens you, the silence, the solitude, the uncertainty, not as an enemy, but as a sacred invitation. Because inside that space is your liberation, not from the world, but from the constant need to control it. The peace you seek is not in more answers. It is in learning to sit with the questions. It is not in perfection. It is in presence. It is not in becoming someone else. It is in unbecoming who you were told to be. And this return is not a straight line. It is a spiral. You will get lost again. You will resist again. You will forget again. But each time you choose to return, it becomes easier. The space becomes more familiar. The silence becomes more soothing. The stillness becomes more natural. And eventually, you stop fearing the empty space. You start to crave it. Because you realize it is not empty at all. It is the fullness of your being, untouched by the noise of the world. So, if you are searching for peace, stop running toward it. Sit down. Breathe deeply and ask yourself, what am I afraid to feel? What truth am I avoiding? What silence am I unwilling to enter? Then step gently into that space, not to fix it, not to force it, but simply to be with it, to hold it, to see what arises when you no longer resist what is. You may cry, you may tremble, you may feel lost, but you will also feel something else, something underneath the pain, deeper than the fear. You will feel yourself, the part of you that is not broken, the part of you that has never needed to prove anything to anyone, the part of you that knows how to sit in the middle of the storm and still know peace. This is where healing happens. This is where wisdom arises. This is where true freedom begins. And it does not begin with understanding more. It begins with entering the space you once feared, with breathing in silence and finding that it holds you, not harms you, with letting go of the chase and discovering that what you were chasing has always lived inside you. Peace is not far. It is not hidden. It is simply waiting in the stillness you've been taught to avoid. The moment you stop running from that stillness is the moment you begin to live, fully, freely, peacefully. And in that life you no longer seek peace, you become it. You do not need to earn rest, embracing stillness without guilt. In a world that worships movement, stillness has become a rebellion. In a society that glorifies productivity, rest is often treated like a reward reserved only for those who have done enough, worked enough, proved enough. You hear it all the time. I'll rest after I finish this. I can't stop now, there's too much to do. Maybe next weekend I'll slow down. And yet, somehow, the to-do list never ends. The pressure never fades. The finish line keeps moving, and the soul keeps waiting, quietly, patiently, aching for a breath it is never allowed to take. But what if rest was not something you earned, but something you are inherently worthy of? What if you didn't have to prove your exhaustion before you were allowed to pause? What if, instead of tying your value to your output, you remembered that your very being is already enough? In Buddhism, the concept of right effort is not about pushing beyond limits. It is not about grinding until you collapse. It is about balance, wisdom, intention. It is about knowing when to act and when to stop acting, when to move and when to become still, when to speak and when to remain silent. In this sacred rhythm of life, rest is not a break from progress. It is part of the progress itself. But so many people carry guilt when they stop. They rest, but only after apologizing for it. They take a break, but spend the entire time thinking about what they should be doing. Their bodies may be still, but their minds are racing. And this is not true rest. This is a pause filled with punishment, a stillness filled with shame. To reclaim rest as your right is to begin healing the part of you that was taught that your worth comes from your usefulness. That rest is laziness, that slowing down is weakness, that stillness is indulgence. But these ideas are not truth, they are conditioning. Stories passed down through systems that valued productivity over presence, efficiency over well-being, speed over soul. And it is time to let those stories go. You are not a machine. You are a being made of breath and bone and rhythm. Your body, your nervous system, your heart, they all operate in cycles. You are meant to expand and contract, to rise and fall, to do and to be. The inhale and the exhale are equally sacred, and yet, somewhere along the way, we were taught to inhale endlessly, taking in more, doing more, becoming more, while neglecting the exhale, the release, the rest. And so we hold, we tighten, we become overloaded with stress, with noise, with the pressure to keep going. But just as the lungs cannot function without the exhale, your soul cannot function without stillness. You need rest, not just physical, but emotional, mental, spiritual. You need the kind of rest that comes not from sleeping through exhaustion, but from living in a way that doesn't constantly exhaust you. This kind of rest begins with permission. The permission to say no, the permission to do less, the permission to sit in silence without guilt, the permission to take a slow morning without apology, the permission to simply be without needing to explain or justify your stillness to anyone. Because here's the truth. Stillness is where your clarity is born. Rest is where your healing happens. Quiet is where your intuition speaks. When you live without rest, you live disconnected from yourself. You lose sight of what matters. You forget how to feel. You become reactive instead of responsive, numb instead of aware, busy instead of present. But when you make space for stillness, real, intentional, unapologetic stillness, you begin to return to yourself. You begin to hear your own breath again. You begin to notice the weight you've been carrying. You begin to feel the ache in your body that's been asking for attention. You begin to listen, not to the outside world, but to the wisdom within you. And in that listening, something sacred unfolds. You remember that you are not behind, you are not lazy, you are not broken, you are simply tired. And tiredness is not a flaw, it is a signal, a call to rest, a call to slow down, a call to return to the natural rhythm that your soul remembers even when your mind forgets. In Buddhism, monks do not meditate for hours on end because they are trying to escape the world. They meditate to see it more clearly, to see themselves more clearly. They practice stillness not as a retreat from life, but as a way to enter it more fully, more presently, more awake. You do not need to go to a monastery to find this stillness. You can begin here, in your home, in your room, in your breath. You can begin by closing your eyes for 5 minutes and letting your mind unclench. You can begin by walking without headphones, letting the world enter you softly. You can begin by doing one thing slowly, with full presence, washing the dishes, making tea, folding a blanket. You can begin by saying to yourself, I deserve to rest. I do not have to earn it. I am allowed to be. This practice of resting without guilt is radical in a culture of constant doing. But it is necessary, not only for your health, but for your joy. Because when you rest, you begin to reconnect with the parts of life that don't shout, the beauty that doesn't demand your attention, the peace that doesn't beg to be noticed. You begin to feel the softness of a breeze, the stillness of your own heartbeat, the quiet joy of simply existing. And slowly you begin to realize that you don't need to run to keep up. You don't need to chase worthiness. You don't need to prove yourself through exhaustion. You begin to embody a different truth, that your rest is not a reward, it is a birthright, that your stillness is not wasted time, it is sacred time, that your worth is not in what you do, it is in who you are when you are not doing anything at all. Let go of the guilt. Let go of the inner voice that tells you to keep going, even when every part of you is asking to pause. Let go of the belief that rest makes you fall behind. Because the truth is, rest brings you back. Back to your center. Back to your wisdom. Back to your peace. You were never meant to live in constant motion. You were meant to ebb and flow, to rise and rest, to give and receive. And in that balance, you find not only peace, but power. The power that comes from a well-rested mind, a nourished body, a heart that has space to feel. So today, choose rest. Not as a luxury, not as a weakness, but as a sacred declaration. I matter. My well-being matters. My peace matters. And I no longer need to earn the right to slow down. I choose to slow down because I am alive, because I am here, because I am enough, just as I am, even in stillness, especially in stillness. The healing power of allowing, how surrender transforms suffering into wisdom. There is a quiet, sacred power that very few people ever discover, not because it is hidden, but because it is often disguised as weakness. It is not taught in schools, praised in headlines, or rewarded by the world's systems of achievement. It is often overlooked, misunderstood, even feared. Yet those who find it, truly find it, come to understand one of the deepest truths of human life, that healing begins not when we conquer our suffering, but when we allow it to be seen, felt, and understood without resistance. This power is called allowing. To allow is not to collapse. It is not to passively accept harm or injustice. It is not to wave the white flag and retreat from life. It is the opposite. It is the courage to stay, the willingness to meet yourself, fully, completely, unapologetically, in the raw, unfiltered truth of the moment. Allowing is a sacred posture. It is the soul's way of saying, even this I will sit with, even here I will stay awake. In Buddhism, the root of suffering is not in what happens to us, it is in our resistance to what happens. We suffer not only because of pain, but because we do not want to feel the pain. We fight it, we suppress it, we judge it, we demand that it go away, and in doing so, we unknowingly deepen it. We create layers around the wound, anger, fear, shame, denial, until the pain is no longer just pain, but a prison. But when we allow, the prison begins to dissolve. Allowing is the gateway to healing, not because it makes the pain disappear instantly, but because it creates space around the pain, space to breathe, space to feel, space to listen. In that space, something extraordinary begins to happen. The pain starts to teach. It begins to speak, not in words, but in insight, in softness, in inner knowing. It shows you what needs to be seen. It reveals the parts of you that were neglected. It uncovers truths that you were never ready to hold before. This does not happen through force. You cannot push your way into healing. You cannot demand insight. You cannot rush the unfolding of wisdom. You can only open to it, invite it, make space for it. And this opening happens through the practice of allowing. To allow means to be with what is, even if what is feels unbearable. It means to soften your jaw when your instinct is to clench, to breathe into your belly when fear rises, to place a hand on your heart and say, "You are safe here," even when everything feels chaotic. It means not rushing to fix the emotion, but letting it exist, letting it move, letting it complete its cycle. Because emotions are not the enemy, they are messengers. They arise not to torment you, but to guide you back to yourself. Grief shows you what mattered. Anger reveals what was crossed. Fear shows you where you need to build trust. Sadness softens you, teaches you to let go. Each one holds wisdom, but only if you are willing to sit with them long enough to hear it. Most people never receive this wisdom because they are too quick to escape it. They reach for distraction, for numbing, for avoidance. Not because they are weak, but because they were never taught how to be with pain without identifying with it. They were never shown that pain, when held with compassion, becomes transformation. In Buddhist meditation, we practice non-judgmental awareness. We sit with whatever arises, thoughts, sensations, emotions, without labeling them as good or bad. We observe, we breathe, we create space. This is the heart of allowing. It is not about liking what arises, it is about no longer fighting it. And in that shift from resistance to presence, healing begins. You may wonder, but what if what I feel is too much? What if I'm overwhelmed? And the answer is gentle. You are never asked to feel more than what this moment contains. You are only asked to be with this breath, this feeling, this fragment of now. The mind may panic, imagining the pain will last forever. But pain, like everything in life, is impermanent. It rises, it crests, it falls. When you allow it, you ride the wave instead of being crushed by it. Allowing also means accepting the parts of you that you've spent years rejecting. The insecurity, the jealousy, the doubt, the longing. The parts that don't look spiritual, that don't fit the image of who you think you should be. But all of it is part of your humanity. All of it belongs. Healing does not come from becoming perfect. It comes from making peace with your wholeness. When you allow these parts to exist, you stop fragmenting yourself. You begin to feel whole again, not because the pain disappeared, but because you stopped dividing yourself into pieces of acceptable and unacceptable. You welcomed all of you back to the table. And in that welcome you begin to feel safe, not because the world changed, but because you stopped abandoning yourself. There is a kind of warmth that begins to grow in this space, a kind of tenderness that replaces judgment. You become less reactive, more compassionate. You stop rushing your healing and start honoring its pace. You stop comparing your path to others and start trusting your own unfolding. You begin to see that every experience, especially the painful ones, was not a detour, but part of your return. Allowing also transforms how you hold space for others. When you have sat with your own pain without judgment, you stop judging the pain of others. You stop trying to fix them. You start listening more deeply, loving more unconditionally. You become a presence of healing, not because you have all the answers, but because you are no longer afraid of the questions. This is why the practice of allowing is so radical. It changes not just your relationship to yourself, but your relationship to the world. You become softer, stronger, more rooted. You are no longer thrown by every storm. You know how to sit with discomfort, how to breathe through uncertainty, how to stay when others run. And this presence, this ability to stay with what is the foundation of inner peace. You do not find this peace by avoiding suffering. You find it by going through it with presence, with awareness, with the willingness to feel without collapsing. So how do you begin? You begin in small moments. You pause when you want to react. You breathe when you want to rush. You place your hand on your heart when pain arises and say, "This belongs. I can be with this." You create moments of stillness, not to escape, but to allow. You make space for silence, for feeling, for truth. You may cry, you may tremble, you may doubt. That's okay. Allow that too. Healing is not always graceful. Sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's quiet. But it is always sacred, and it is always yours. You are not broken. You are unfolding, and every time you choose to allow rather than resist, you move one step closer to yourself, to your wholeness, to your wisdom, to the peace that has been waiting inside you all along. So allow the tears, Allow the joy, allow the fear, allow the confusion, allow the beauty, allow the unknown, allow your humanity, because in the act of allowing, you come home, not to who you were told to be, but to who you've always been. And in that homecoming, suffering becomes sacred, pain becomes a teacher, stillness becomes strength, and your life becomes a living meditation, not because you escaped the world, but because you learned how to meet it with an open, allowing heart. The wisdom of staying empty, creating space for the sacred to enter. There is a kind of fullness that the world encourages, full schedules, full minds, full closets, full lives. We are taught to accumulate, to gather, to fill every silence with noise, every day with tasks, every moment with productivity or entertainment. The world tells us that the more we carry, the more we are, that the more we own, the more we belong, that the more we do, the more we are valued. But in the silent wisdom of the Buddhist path, the truth is often the opposite. It is in emptiness that our deepest wisdom arises. It is in emptiness that life becomes sacred again. This emptiness is not nothingness. It is not a hollow void, nor a lack of meaning. It is not loneliness or despair. It is not emptiness as most people fear it. The emptiness of not being needed, not being seen, not being enough. Number. This emptiness is holy. It is the quiet space within us that holds everything gently, without clinging. It is the clear sky after the storm, the still lake after the wind, the breath that remains when all the words fall away. In the Buddhist tradition, shunyata, often translated as emptiness, is a foundational teaching, but it is often misunderstood. Emptiness does not mean absence of life. It means absence of fixed form, of permanent identity, of rigid expectation. It means that everything is in motion, everything is interconnected, everything is changing. It means that no thing, no self, no belief is solid or separate. Emptiness is what allows things to move, to breathe, to transform. And in our own lives, this teaching becomes a profound invitation to let go of what fills us unnecessarily, so we can become a vessel for what truly matters. Because most people are full, but not with what they need. They are full of noise, full of judgment, full of plans, full of pressure, full of stories about who they should be. They are full of things they've outgrown, identities they've inherited, responsibilities they never chose. Their hearts are full of old pain, their minds full of looping thoughts, their spirits full of fatigue. And in that fullness there is no room left for grace, for stillness, for the sacred to enter. The wisdom of staying empty is the wisdom of making space. It is the practice of clearing the inner clutter, not just once, but over and over again as life builds up around you. It is the choice to release rather than collect, to soften rather than grip, to sit rather than chase, to say, I don't need to carry this anymore, and gently set it down. This kind of emptiness is not empty at all. It is alive. It is radiant. It is the spaciousness that allows you to finally feel yourself again, to hear your own voice beneath the noise of the world, to recognize your true needs, your real boundaries, your sacred longing. When you stay empty, you stop filling your life with the unnecessary. You stop chasing the next distraction. You stop reacting to every emotion. You stop over-explaining, over-committing, overcompensating. You begin to live with intention, with awareness, with a quiet kind of clarity that the world may not understand, but your soul does. Because staying empty is not about abandoning life. It is about preparing for it. It is about becoming the open bowl that can receive the rain, the quiet field where new seeds can be planted, the clean page on which something true can be written. It is in emptiness that creativity arises. It is in emptiness that insight appears. It is in emptiness that healing begins. But to stay empty in a world that tells you to keep adding is not easy. It requires discernment, courage, presence. It means learning to sit with the discomfort of space, not rushing to fill it, but letting it reveal what it needs to. Because sometimes the space brings grief, sometimes it brings boredom, sometimes it brings fear. But if you stay with it, if you resist the urge to distract yourself, it eventually brings peace. The mind fears emptiness because it cannot control it, it cannot define it. But the heart remembers it, the body craves it, the soul rests in it. Emptiness is the ground of all transformation. If the cup is full, it cannot be filled. If the mind is full, it cannot be quiet. If the heart is full of noise, it cannot hear the soft whisper of truth. So what does it look like to stay empty in daily life? It means taking a breath before you respond. It means letting go of the need to fix someone else's pain. It means not rushing to label your emotions, just letting them move through. It means creating pockets of silence throughout your day. It means releasing things that no longer nourish you, even if they once did. It means noticing when you are filling your time to avoid yourself. It means trusting that you do not need to be full of something in order to be worthy. In fact, the more space you create within you, the more fully you begin to receive the gifts of life. Not just the ones that look good on the surface, but the ones that truly nourish your spirit. Presence, peace, truth, insight, connection that doesn't come from performance, but from being. And slowly, your relationship with yourself changes. You stop fearing the quiet. You stop rushing to fix every moment. You stop needing to prove your worth. You begin to understand that your value does not come from what you carry, but from your ability to remain spacious, soft, and clear. You begin to move through life like a temple, not crowded, but sacred. You begin to speak less, but with more meaning. You begin to hold others gently because you have created space in yourself. You begin to release what once weighed you down, not because you are cold, but because you are ready to be light. And when the world asks you to fill up again, fill your time, your feed, your mind, you smile and return to the breath, to the simplicity, to the space. Because you know now, fullness is not always abundance. Emptiness is not always lack. Sometimes the most generous thing you can offer yourself is space. Space to breathe, space to feel, space to not know, space to rest, space to begin again. This is the wisdom of staying empty. It is not the absence of life, it is the preparation for it. It is not the rejection of connection, it is the deepening of it. It is not a hollow void, it is a sacred container. And the more you honor it, the more you realize everything you were trying to find in the fullness of the world was waiting in the spaciousness of your own soul. Not because you added anything, but because you finally stopped running from the gift of being empty, of being open, of being whole. You were never meant to be a masterpiece. You were meant to be a garden. There is a quiet, relentless pressure in the world today, so deeply woven into the fabric of daily life that most people don't even realize they are carrying it. It's the pressure to become something polished, to become finished, to become perfect, to become worthy. It whispers through every ad, every compliment, every comparison. Become more, become beautiful, become admired, become enough. And so we try, we measure, we chase, we sculpt our lives as if we are carving a statue from stone, believing that one day, if we just keep chiseling, we will finally arrive at a version of ourselves that is complete, a masterpiece. But we are not stone, we are soil. We are not meant to be perfect, static monuments for others to gaze at and applaud. We are meant to be living ecosystems, ever-changing, ever-growing, sometimes blooming, sometimes barren, sometimes overflowing with color, sometimes quiet and resting beneath the frost. We are not meant to become final, we are meant to remain in process. And the moment we shift from sculpting ourselves into an object and instead begin to tend to ourselves like a garden, something deep and sacred begins to awaken within us. We remember how to live. Buddhism teaches the importance of impermanence, that nothing is fixed, that everything arises and passes away, that no self is solid, no identity is permanent, no moment can be grasped or held. In the garden of the self, this truth becomes not just a philosophical concept, but a way of being, a daily practice, a permission slip to stop trying to freeze yourself in perfection and instead learn how to dance with the changing weather of your inner and outer world. Because here is the truth. You are not failing when things fall apart. You are not broken when you feel lost. You are not behind when you are quiet. These are just seasons. These are just cycles. These are the natural rhythms of a being who is alive, not finished. But when we believe we must become a masterpiece, we fight these seasons. We see sadness as a flaw. We see rest as weakness. We see healing as something that should be complete by now. We panic when the flowers of our joy begin to wither. We question our worth when we don't feel beautiful or productive or confident. And in that panic, we begin to harden. We start sculpting again. We reach for the chisel, not the watering can. We try to control rather than tend. We become harsh with ourselves, rigid, unforgiving. And gardens do not thrive under force. They need gentleness. They need space. They need time. They need understanding. They need presence. To live as a garden is to honor the entire process, not just the blooms, but the roots, not just the growth, but the decay, not just the harvest, but the stillness of winter. It means learning to love yourself, not only when you are blossoming, but when you are bare, when you are tender, when you are between versions of yourself. It means recognizing that even when nothing seems to be happening on the surface, deep transformation is still taking place beneath the soil. To live this way, you must slow down. You must become a witness to your own life rather than just a critic or a sculptor. You must ask yourself, what is growing here? What needs more light? What needs to be pruned with care? What parts of me are asking to be seen, not judged? What seeds of healing or creativity have I planted that I haven't yet watered? This is not self-help. This is self-remembering. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a landscape to be loved. To live as a garden means allowing all parts of yourself to be present. The parts that are blooming and the parts that are broken. The parts that are loud and vibrant and the parts that are quiet and unsure. It means refusing to exile your pain, refusing to shame your slow growth, refusing to rush your blooming just to fit someone else's calendar. In this way, the garden becomes a teacher, a mirror, a metaphor for what it means to live truthfully. Because a garden doesn't try to prove anything, it doesn't rush to impress. It simply is. It responds to what it needs. It leans toward the sun. It rests when it must. It lets go of what is no longer serving it. Old leaves, wilted blooms, dead roots, without apology. It trusts the wisdom of the earth, the timing of the rain, the importance of waiting. And you can live this way too. You can choose to let go of the pressure to become a final version of yourself. You can choose to tend rather than sculpt, to water rather than judge, to sit with yourself in love rather than impatience. You can begin to create a life that is not focused on becoming impressive, but on becoming real. You can honor your seasons. You can bloom when you're ready, not when you're expected. You can allow the frost of sadness to come and trust that it too is part of your growth. You can let go of the image you've been trying to maintain and instead nurture the soul that's been asking to breathe. When you live as a garden, you understand that healing is not linear. That joy does not always look like laughter. That growth is often quiet. That there are entire seasons of inner work that no one else will see, but that are no less sacred. You begin to find peace in the patience. You begin to find strength in softness. You begin to live more from presence than from performance. And something miraculous happens. The more you let yourself be a garden, the more you begin to grow things you never expected. Unexpected joys, new ways of being, love that does not demand, creativity that flows without force, wisdom that rises from within, not from chasing answers. People may not always understand your seasons. They may question your silence, your softness, your slowness. Let them. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to be in harmony with yourself, to live rooted and real, to become what only you can become, in the time and the way that is true to your soul. So, put down the chisel, walk away from the mirror that only shows you your flaws, step into the garden of your being, pull the weeds of judgment, sit with the wildness of your emotions, water your needs, tend to your longings. Let yourself be tended to by something greater, the breath, the light, the presence of simply being alive. Because you were never meant to be admired for your perfection. You were meant to be inhabited, felt, lived. You were never meant to be a masterpiece on a pedestal. You were meant to be a garden in bloom, and in rest, and in bloom again. Forever unfinished, forever growing, forever enough. The courage to sit in the middle, how to hold the tension of becoming without breaking. There is a space in life that almost no one talks about, not because it's rare, but because it's uncomfortable. A space between who you were and who you are becoming, between the past that shaped you and the future that calls you forward, between the letting go and the receiving. It is not a place of clarity. It is not a place of certainty. It is not the beginning, and it is not the end. It is the middle, and this middle is where most people feel lost, afraid, exhausted, or forgotten, not because they've done anything wrong, but because they are standing on ground that no longer supports who they were, yet has not fully formed the path to who they will be. In Buddhism, this space is known. It is not rejected. It is not rushed through. It is held with reverence, with patience, with tenderness. It is part of the path. It is the sacred cocoon between identities. And yet, in the modern world, this middle is treated like failure. It is pathologized, medicated, judged. If you're not producing, if you're not rising, if you're not succeeding, then you must be slipping. You must be wrong. You must be falling behind. But that is not true. The middle is not a fall. It is a pause, a sacred in-between. And it takes great courage to stay there. Because everything in you will want to escape it. Your mind will crave answers. Your ego will crave action. You'll want to make a decision, fix something, move forward. You'll want to find the lesson, the clarity, the conclusion. But nothing grows in rushed soil. Nothing blooms in panic. The transformation you are longing for cannot be forced into being. It must be allowed to unfold in its own sacred timing. The middle is uncomfortable because it is formless. You can no longer define yourself by what you used to be, by the job, the title, the relationship, the role, the mask. But neither can you yet grasp what is next. You are dissolving. You are being remade, not with violence, but with a quiet undoing, a sacred disassembling, a pulling apart of the false to make room for the true. And this is not a mistake. This is a deep initiation into your becoming. In the middle, old beliefs rise to be questioned, wounds rise to be seen, attachments rise to be released. You are being asked to feel things you've buried, to see truths you've avoided, to be with the version of yourself that exists beneath performance and productivity. This is the work. This is the process. This is the fire that purifies, not by burning you down, but by burning away what no longer serves you. It is here, in this sacred middle, that your strength is revealed. Not the strength to push through, but the strength to sit down, to breathe, to feel, to allow. This kind of strength is quiet. It is invisible. It is not praised or recognized or celebrated, but it is holy. It is the strength of the tree that stays rooted in a storm, the strength of the earth that continues to hold even as the seasons strip it bare, the strength of the heart that does not shut down even when it doesn't understand. There is a temptation in the middle to define things too quickly, to label the pain, to name the lesson, to seek closure where none yet exists. But Buddhism teaches us to hold uncertainty not as a threat, but as a teacher, to sit with the questions, to soften into the not knowing, to allow the space itself to speak, even when we do not yet understand its language. Because sometimes the lesson is not what you think. Sometimes the lesson is not about clarity. It is about trust. It is about learning to be in the dark without losing your faith in the light. The world may not understand your middle. It may ask you to rush. It may project its discomfort onto your stillness. But you are not here to satisfy the timeline of others. You are not here to be understood by those who have not yet learned to honor their own becoming. You are here to live truthfully. And sometimes truth is quiet. Sometimes it is incomplete. Sometimes it is messy. But it is still sacred. When you sit in the middle, you begin to learn a new kind of presence, one that is not rooted in achieving, but in being. You begin to listen differently, not to the noise of the world, but to the quiet voice within. You begin to trust differently, not because you know what is next, but because you know you don't have to know. You begin to breathe differently, not in panic, but in reverence. You begin to live differently, not as a project, but as a process. And in time, this middle begins to reveal its gifts. You begin to see things you couldn't see before. You begin to feel the subtle shifts, the returning of your intuition, the softening of your heart, the quiet invitations to move, not with urgency, but with alignment. The path begins to form, not because you forced it, but because you waited. This waiting is not passive, it is active trust. It is a daily choice to stay present, to stay soft, to stay open, to resist the urge to rush, to choose the wisdom of stillness. It is the practice of coming home to yourself, breath by breath, even when the destination is unclear. And you will want to give up sometimes. You will question yourself. You will think you've done something wrong. But I promise you, if you are in the middle, you are exactly where you need to be. You are not lost. You are being remade. You are not broken. You are being prepared. You are not behind. You are on sacred ground. So let yourself be undone. Let yourself be emptied. Let yourself be soft. Let yourself be slow. Let yourself be incomplete. Let yourself be a question, because you are not a product. You are not a performance. You are not a destination. You are a living, breathing, evolving soul. And you are allowed to sit in the middle of your becoming. You are allowed to take your time. You are allowed to heal without a deadline. You are allowed to feel without a name for the feeling. You are allowed to not know. Because the not knowing is where the real knowing begins. Because the middle is not a punishment. It is the sacred space of transformation. And it will not last forever. But while it does, may you meet it with presence. May you meet yourself with love. And may you come to see this space not as empty, but as full. Full of wisdom, full of becoming, full of life that is not yet visible, but already forming, already unfolding, already enough. The art of holding yourself, becoming a safe place in a world that keeps you running. In a world that demands constant movement, applause, and reinvention, it can be easy to forget that one of the deepest spiritual practices is not pushing harder, but learning how to hold yourself gently through everything you feel. Not fixing, not rushing, not becoming something for others, but holding. Simply holding. This practice is rarely spoken about, yet it may be the most crucial one of all. the practice of becoming your own sanctuary, of creating within your own being a space where you can be messy and tender and imperfect without fear of rejection or shame, where you can rest in your own arms when the world is loud and cold, where you can cry without needing a reason, where you can say, "I don't know what I need," and still be worthy of care. This is the art of holding yourself, and in a society that urges us to abandon ourselves for validation, performance, and productivity, this practice is revolutionary. In Buddhism, compassion begins with self, not because the self is to be worshipped or elevated above others, but because you cannot give what you do not have. You cannot extend true compassion to the world if your own inner world is filled with harshness. You cannot listen deeply to others if you cannot first listen to the pain, the longing, the silence within yourself. And you cannot hold space for healing if you continue to exile the hurting parts of your own soul. But many of us were never taught how to hold ourselves. We were taught how to please, how to perform, how to suppress, how to endure. We learned to survive in a world that didn't always make space for our softness. We became skilled at holding others, often while abandoning ourselves. We offered love to everyone but the person in the mirror, and over time, the inner space became hostile, cold, empty. Not because we are broken, but because no one ever modeled what it meant to hold your own soul like a child, cradling it not for what it does, but simply because it exists. So we grew up with full schedules and empty hearts. We became successful but disconnected. We appeared strong while feeling brittle. We inspired others but doubted ourselves. We kept going. We always kept going. But we were never told that we could stop, that we could sit down and rest, that we didn't have to earn our right to exist by giving more, doing more, being more. And so this is where the healing begins. Not in becoming someone new, but in remembering that the self you have always been is already enough, already deserving of care, already worthy of being held with tenderness. The one who doubts, the one who fears, the one who has fallen, the one who is still unsure. All of these versions of you are not in the way of your path. They are your path. To hold yourself is to meet yourself where you are, not where you think you should be. It is to say, "This is hard, and I will stay with myself anyway." It is to become the calm presence within your own storm, the witness to your own unraveling, the hand that doesn't try to fix but simply remains. This is not a passive act. It is not laziness or indulgence. It is deep inner work. It is presence. It is a powerful reclaiming of the part of you that has been running for too long, the part that has been trying to achieve their way into worthiness, that has been trying to prove their way into love, that has been afraid to feel, afraid to rest, afraid to be seen without a mask. But when you begin to hold yourself, you start to slow down, you begin to soften, you start to hear the voice beneath the noise, the voice that says, "I'm tired." The voice that says, "I need something different." The voice that says, "I'm afraid and I want to feel safe." These voices do not come to harm you. They are not weakness. They are the soul speaking. They are the inner child knocking on the door of your awareness, asking to come inside, to be seen, to be held. And when you finally stop to listen, you begin to create a space within that feels like home. This home does not always look polished. It does not always have answers. It is not a place where things are fixed overnight, but it is a place where nothing has to be hidden, nothing has to be earned, nothing has to be justified. When you begin to live from this inner sanctuary, everything changes. You become less reactive because you are no longer seeking permission to feel. You begin to move with intention, not because you're trying to control everything, but because you are anchored in your truth. You stop abandoning yourself in difficult moments. You stay, you breathe, you hold, and slowly you begin to repair what was broken, not through force, but through presence. You become your own safe place, not perfect, not always calm, but trustworthy, steady, kind. This does not mean you never fall apart. It means you no longer fear the falling. It means you trust that when you fall, you know how to be with yourself in the darkness. You know how to sit with your pain without shaming it. You know how to rest in the middle of confusion without rushing into false clarity. You begin to understand that life is not about constantly arriving. It is about constantly returning to yourself, to the breath, to the body, to the awareness that holds all things with compassion. You are not here to master life. You are here to meet life. To greet yourself again and again with gentleness, especially in the places you once pushed away. You are not here to fix every broken part. You are here to hold those parts like you would a scared child, saying, "You are safe. I will not leave you, even now." And from this place of inner holding, true transformation begins. Not because you force it, but because you create the conditions for it to emerge naturally. Just as flowers bloom in warm soil, your soul begins to blossom in the presence of safety. But make no mistake, this is a daily practice. There will be days when you forget, when the old patterns return, when you find yourself running again, judging again, abandoning again. That is okay. The practice is not to never fall. It is to return when you do. To return again and again to that place within you that is soft enough to receive all of you. To hold your joy without grasping. To hold your sorrow without collapsing. To hold your dreams without pressure. To hold your fears without judgment. To hold your entire humanity without needing it to become anything else. This is what it means to be truly alive, to be fully here, to be with yourself through the changing weather of your own heart. You will not always know what you need. You will not always have the right words, but your presence, your willingness to stay is enough. So today, choose to hold yourself in silence, in stillness, in breath, not because you are broken, but because you are worthy. Not because you need to be fixed, but because you are already whole, even in your becoming. You are the safe space you've been waiting for. You are the gentle presence your soul longs for. You are the one who stays, even when it's hard. And that staying, that holding, that is the beginning of everything. Learning to be carried, the spiritual power of not always having to carry yourself. There comes a point in every life, often quietly, often without warning, when even the strongest parts of us grow weary, not because we are weak, but because we have held too much for too long. We have become the rock for everyone else, the one who never breaks, the one who always knows what to do, the one who keeps it all together, even when their own heart is falling apart. And while this strength is noble, while it is built from resilience and deep love, it is not meant to be endless. Even the strongest trees bend in the storm. Even the tallest mountains erode. Even the stars burn out. In our society, we are taught to honor the ones who carry everything, the providers, the caretakers, the dependable. We admire those who never show emotion, who keep going no matter what. We lift up the image of self-reliance as the ultimate goal. Be your own foundation. Be your own source. Be your own shelter. And yes, there is beauty in learning to stand on your own, in becoming a refuge for yourself when no one else understands you. There is a sacred strength in learning to soothe your own wounds, in knowing that you can walk through darkness without falling apart. But what happens when the strength you've relied on begins to crack? What happens when the weight becomes too much? What happens when you reach a moment where the very thing that has kept you going, your capacity to carry, is now the very thing pulling you down? This is the place few talk about, but many live in. The place where holding it all in becomes dangerous. The place where pretending to be okay becomes unbearable. The place where the mask starts to suffocate you, where even breathing feels like a burden. And yet, most people keep walking. They keep smiling. They keep saying, "I'm fine," because the alternative, to ask for help, to admit that they are tired, is terrifying. What if no one comes? What if they're judged? What if they're seen as weak? But in Buddhism, weakness is not defined by whether or not you need support. Weakness is resistance. Weakness is the refusal to see what is real. Weakness is clinging to an identity that no longer serves you. And the identity of the one who carries everything is seductive. It gives us worth. It gives us control. It gives us safety. But it can also trap us. It can isolate us. It can exhaust us to the point where life begins to feel more like a performance than a presence. There is a deeper truth, one that lives beneath all the stories we've been told. And that truth is this. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is to stop carrying everything alone. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is fall apart in someone else's arms. Sometimes the deepest healing begins not when you hold on tighter, but when you finally let yourself be held. There is spiritual power in surrender. There is grace in learning how to be carried. And this is not just about leaning on other people. This is about learning to be held by life itself, by presence, by breath, by the ground beneath your feet, by the unseen support that you may not understand, but that has never left you, not even for a second. In Buddhist practice, surrender is not giving up. It is letting go of the illusion that you are the sole controller of everything. It is releasing the grip you have on life so that life can finally hold you. It is softening into trust, even when you don't know what comes next. It is lying down, not in defeat, but in reverence, and whispering, "I can't carry this right now. Let something else carry me." And when you say this, not always out loud, sometimes only inside your heart, you begin to feel the shift. You begin to notice that the world does not crumble when you rest, that the people you love do not leave when you show them your tears, that the breath still comes even when your thoughts are scattered, that the sun still rises even when you're not trying to hold up the sky. This is not a fantasy. This is not a spiritual cliché. This is the actual living truth that many never discover because they are too afraid to stop carrying. They are too afraid of what will happen if they let go. But the ones who do, the ones who stop, who fall, who ask for help, who admit they are tired, those are the ones who truly begin to live. Not because their burdens disappear, but because they are no longer alone with them. And perhaps most beautifully, they discover that they were never alone in the first place. They begin to notice the small ways life has always been holding them. The friend who called at the exact right moment. The stranger who smiled when they needed it most. The sunrise that wrapped them in gold after a sleepless night. The breath that came again and again, even when they didn't think they could keep going. The inner voice that kept whispering, "Stay. Just one more step." These are not coincidences. These are forms of being carried. These are life's hands, unseen but steady, gentle but unshakable, reminding you that you were never meant to carry it all, that you are not weak for needing help, that you are not broken for needing rest, that you are not a burden for needing someone to witness your pain. In fact, the very act of letting yourself be carried can become your greatest teacher. Because in that surrender, you begin to see the illusions that were driving you, the belief that you must earn love, the belief that you must always be strong, the belief that your pain is only valid if it is hidden. These beliefs begin to melt when you allow yourself to be held. And in their place, something softer grows, self-compassion, gentle presence, real connection. Because when you stop carrying everything, you make room to feel again, to be real again, to love again, not from obligation but from fullness. You make room to listen. You make room to see the beauty you were too tired to notice before. You make room to be surprised. You make room for life to meet you, not just at your strength, but at your surrender. So, how do you begin this practice? You begin by telling the truth, not just to others, but to yourself. You say, "I'm tired." You say, "I'm overwhelmed." You say, "I can't do this all on my own." You say these words not as confessions of failure, but as acts of liberation. You say them knowing that the truth does not make you weak, it makes you real. And being real is the most powerful thing you can be. You begin by resting before you collapse. You begin by asking for help before the silence becomes unbearable. You begin by holding your own hand in the dark. You begin by choosing softness where you once chose survival. You begin by trusting that there is something larger than your fear, something deeper than your exhaustion, something wiser than your ego that will rise to meet you if you only let it. And the more you practice being carried, the more you begin to notice how supported you really are. You begin to feel the ground beneath you not as an afterthought, but as a sacred presence. You begin to see the people in your life not as threats to your independence, but as mirrors of your belonging. You begin to recognize your own breath as a prayer. You begin to live not from your defenses, but from your essence. And from this place, everything changes. You no longer need to prove your worth. You no longer need to perform your strength. You no longer need to carry what is not yours to carry. You simply show up with your truth, with your tenderness, with your trembling hands, and allow the moment to hold you. And the moment always will. Because life is not asking you to be unbreakable. It is asking you to be honest. It is asking you to be present. It is asking you to be willing to feel what you feel and ask for what you need. It is asking you to remember that you are not alone, even when you feel like you are. So if you are tired, rest. If you are breaking, let yourself break open. If you are falling, let yourself fall into the arms of something greater. Not because you are weak, but because you are human. And being human means sometimes you carry, and sometimes you are carried, and both are holy. When the future feels far away, how to return to the beauty of this exact moment. There are seasons of life where the future feels like a fog-covered mountain, distant, unclear, unreachable. You keep walking, but each step feels heavier than the last. You search for meaning, for momentum, for direction, but the path seems to disappear under your feet. And when you're surrounded by that kind of uncertainty, it's easy to feel like you're behind. Like everyone else has figured something out that you've somehow missed. Like time is slipping through your fingers and you're standing still, helpless, lost, waiting for something to arrive that never does. In these moments, the mind becomes frantic. It searches for answers. It loops through worst-case scenarios. It imagines everything that could go wrong, and it calls this being prepared. But it's not preparation. It's fear masquerading as control. And fear, when left unchecked, begins to build walls. Walls between you and your peace, between you and your presence, between you and this moment, which is the only place life ever actually lives. Buddhism teaches that suffering is born not from what is, but from our resistance to what is. And one of the most subtle forms of resistance is our constant obsession with the future. Not the hopeful future, not the future we gently dream of, but the anxious, clinging, fear-driven future. The one that asks, "What if I fail?" The one that whispers, "I'm running out of time." The one that haunts our quiet moments and turns them into pressure cookers of expectation. But here is the truth no one tells you. The future is not missing. It's just not here yet. And your life is not paused because things are unclear. Your life is happening right now, in this breath, in this heartbeat, in this very moment where you are still safe, still breathing, still becoming. When you constantly look to the future for peace, you miss the quiet gifts of now. You miss the sound of the wind through the trees. You miss the way the sunlight hits your skin. You miss the sacredness of your own breath, how it rises and falls without effort, how it carries you forward with such soft devotion. You miss the subtle nudges of your intuition, the ones that whisper, not scream, about where to go next. And most of all, you miss yourself. You miss the part of you that is still here, still alive, still worthy, even in the middle of uncertainty. Learning to return to the present is not a denial of the future. It is a reclaiming of power. Because the future will come, whether you stress about it or not, whether you panic or not, whether you try to predict every outcome or simply allow yourself to be guided one step at a time. The future is not something you control. It is something you meet. And the way you meet it is shaped entirely by how you live now. When the future feels far away, the most healing thing you can do is to make the present feel like home again. This doesn't mean forcing positivity. It doesn't mean pretending you're okay when you're not. It means softening into this moment without judgment. It means placing a hand on your heart and saying, even though I don't know what's next, I choose to be with myself right now. This is what presence means. Not escaping, but embracing. Not bypassing, but befriending. It is the sacred practice of choosing to stay, even when part of you wants to run. Because when you stay, you begin to notice that this moment is not as empty as it seems, that there is still life here, still beauty, still grace, still breath. One of the greatest illusions is that your life will begin once things become clear, that once you have the answers, the plan, the direction, then you can relax, then you can be happy. Then you can finally start living. But clarity is not a prerequisite for peace. Clarity is something that often grows out of peace. When you slow down, when you soften your grip, when you stop trying to figure everything out, that's when insight arises. That's when the next step becomes visible, not because you chased it down, but because you created space for it to emerge. Think of your mind like a muddy lake. When you keep stirring it, the water stays murky. But when you allow it to settle, slowly, the mud sinks and the surface clears. Your future is the same. You don't need to figure out the entire path today. You just need to create enough stillness to hear the next step. And the next step is always found in the now. Sometimes the next step is not an action, but a question. A soft inquiry like, what do I need in this moment? Sometimes it's as simple as drinking water, taking a nap, going outside, breathing deeply. Sometimes it's calling a friend. Sometimes it's crying. Sometimes it's sitting in silence and letting yourself feel what you've been running from. None of these things solve your future, but they do something much more powerful. They bring you back to yourself. They ground you in the truth that you are not a project to be fixed. You are a person to be loved. And that love begins here, not when you arrive, but while you are still on the way. Buddhism speaks of the middle way, the path of balance, of neither clinging nor rejecting, of being fully present with what is. When you live from the middle way, you stop demanding that life give you guarantees. You stop placing conditions on your peace. You learn to breathe in the ambiguity. You learn to make space for joy even when you're uncertain. You learn to honor your sadness without letting it define you. You learn to be alive again. Not just on the days when things go your way, but in every moment, even the ones that confuse you. Especially the ones that confuse you. The future is not some separate destination that you must chase down with stress and effort. The future is the unfolding of the present, and the present is always available, always offering itself to you, always waiting for you to come home. So when your mind spins into fear, pause, feel your feet on the ground, feel your breath move in and out. Name 5 things around you that are real. Touch something solid, listen for a bird, look at the sky, smell the air. These are not distractions, they are doorways. doorways back to the only place you have power, this moment. And in this moment, you are okay. In this moment, you are still alive. In this moment, you are enough. No title or achievement or clarity needed. Just breathe, just presence, just love. You don't need to see the whole path. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need to be 10 steps ahead. You just need to be here, because here is where your life is happening. Here is where healing begins. Here is where peace returns. Here is where the next version of you is quietly forming, not through force, but through the gentle unfolding of attention, the quiet power of presence, the sacred trust in life itself. And when you live like this, moment by moment, breath by breath, you begin to realize something extraordinary. The future is not something to be feared. It is something to be welcomed. And the way you welcome it is by fully inhabiting the only space it can ever reach you. This one, right here, right now. Let go of the identity that no longer feels like you, shedding the skin you outgrew in silence. There will come a moment in your life, not loud, not dramatic, but quietly unmistakable, when you realize that the person you've been pretending to be no longer fits. Not because that version of you was a lie, but because it was a survival story, a temporary costume worn to belong, to be accepted, to stay safe in a world that wasn't ready to see your truth. At first, this realization doesn't arrive with clarity. It comes in whispers, in discomfort that you can't quite explain, in the ache you feel after laughing at something that doesn't really feel like you, in the hollow exhaustion that lingers after saying yes to something you didn't want to do, in the strange numbness that creeps in when you're praised for things that secretly drain you. You begin to notice how tight the mask feels, how heavy the act has become. You begin to feel like a stranger inside your own life, smiling in photos that no longer reflect your soul. And this is when the shedding begins. Not all at once, not in fireworks or revolutions, but slowly, quietly, like leaves falling from a tree at the end of autumn, like old skin peeling away in the stillness of change, like breath softening as you surrender to something you no longer have words for. You see, every identity we wear is a doorway. It brings us somewhere. It teaches us something. It protects us when we need protection. But every doorway, no matter how sacred, is not a destination. It is a passage. And the tragedy of life is not that we wear masks, it's that we forget we are wearing them. We begin to believe that the role we play is the self we are. We begin to confuse performance with personality, survival with truth, approval with love. But Buddhism teaches that the self is not fixed, that who we are is not a solid object, but a flowing process, that we are like the river, always moving, always evolving, always becoming. And to cling to a fixed identity is to step out of the river and try to hold water in your hands. It never works. It was never meant to. What serves you at one stage of life is not meant to follow you forever. Some identities are meant to be released once they've taught you what they came to teach. This shedding is not a betrayal of who you were. It is a homecoming to who you've always been. But the process is painful, not because you are doing something wrong, but because letting go of an identity often means letting go of the people, places, and patterns that reinforced it. It means watching relationships change, watching old dreams dissolve, watching familiar routines fall away. It means facing the terrifying question, if I am not this anymore, then who am I? And that question, while painful, is sacred. It is the beginning of transformation. It is the gateway to a life built not on roles, but on truth, not on habit, but on awareness, not on performance, but on presence. But to walk through that gate, you must be willing to enter the in-between, the space between who you were and who you're becoming. This space is uncomfortable. It is uncertain, it is lonely at times, but it is necessary. Just as the caterpillar dissolves before becoming the butterfly, you too must allow the old structures to fall apart before something new can be born. This process cannot be rushed. It cannot be intellectualized. It cannot be bypassed through affirmations or mantras. It must be lived fully, honestly, gently. And it begins with acknowledgement, with placing your hands on your chest and saying, I no longer want to perform this version of me. With letting yourself feel the grief of that, because there is grief even in growth. There is sadness in letting go of identities that once brought you safety. There is mourning in releasing roles that once brought you love, and that mourning is holy. It is not a sign that you are going backward. It is a sign that you are evolving, that you are honoring what was, even as you step into what is next. So allow yourself to grieve. Cry if you must. Be angry if you must. Feel the disorientation. Feel the uncertainty. Let it all be here. Let it move through you. This is the emotional alchemy of transformation. Not fixing, not forcing, but feeling. And as you feel, you will begin to hear something new. A quieter voice, one that doesn't shout, one that doesn't demand, one that lives underneath the noise. This voice is your essence, your intuition, your soul. At first it may not say much. It may only whisper a few words. This doesn't feel right. Or, I miss myself. Or, there's something more. Trust that voice. Not because it always has a plan, but because it is always honest. Let it guide you, step by step, breath by breath, back into alignment. And slowly you will begin to rebuild, not from old expectations, but from inner knowing, not from who the world told you to be, but from who you feel most free being. You will begin to say yes more authentically. You will begin to say no more confidently. You will begin to live not from fear of rejection, but from love for truth. This is not an easy life, but it is a real one, a full one, a deeply human one. And as you walk this path, you may feel alone at times, but you are not alone. Many are walking beside you, quietly, invisibly, courageously letting go of what no longer fits. And together, silently, we are shaping a new world, one where people are loved for who they are, not what they pretend to be, one where presence is more valued than performance, one where authenticity is the highest currency, one where the soul is not a concept, but a lived reality. And perhaps most beautifully, you will realize that you never lost yourself. You only lost the parts of you that were never truly yours. And what remains is something softer, truer, wiser. Not a version of you that the world created, but the you that existed before the world told you who to be. So if you feel the shedding begin, don't resist it. Don't run from it. Don't try to glue the old skin back on. Let it fall. Let it crack. Let it dissolve. Not because you know who you're becoming, but because you trust who you no longer need to be. Stand in the ashes of the old you and say, I honor you, I thank you, and now I release you. And then walk forward, unmasked, unscripted, unapologetically whole, because the real you was never lost, only waiting to be remembered. When it's time to stop fixing yourself and simply be, the peace found in non-striving. In a world that worships progress, that measures worth by growth and achievement, that rewards hustle and glorifies constant self-improvement, the idea of not fixing yourself feels like sacrilege. We are surrounded by voices, internal and external, urging us to change, to do more, to become better. Every bookstore shelf, every podcast, every motivational speech subtly reinforces one core idea. Who you are right now is not enough. There is something wrong with you that needs to be corrected, improved, transformed. And so you spend your days chasing versions of yourself you think you should be. You read the books, you make the lists, you track the habits, you adjust your diet, you meditate, you journal, you do the inner work. And on the surface, it looks like growth. And sometimes it is, but quietly, without realizing it, you begin to turn your life into a project, and you become the project manager. always tweaking, always analyzing, always searching for the next thing to optimize. And slowly, your days fill not with presence, but with performance, not with peace, but with pressure. Even your spiritual practice becomes another checkbox. Even your healing becomes another goal to achieve. Even your rest becomes something to master. And you wonder why you still feel so tired, so restless, so inadequate. Because you were never meant to fix yourself like a broken object. You were meant to hold yourself like a sacred being. Buddhism teaches that striving itself is a form of suffering, that the relentless pursuit of becoming can obscure the miracle of being, that in our desperate attempt to be better, we often miss the quiet, ordinary beauty of what already is. There is a deeper wisdom, a softer truth, often buried beneath the noise of self-improvement. It whispers gently, "You are not a problem to solve. You are a being to love." And this love is not conditional. It does not arrive only after the wounds are healed. It does not wait for your past to be rewritten or your habits to be perfected. It is here, now, available in this very breath. It has always been. But to feel this love, to receive it, to rest in it, you must pause. You must stop running. You must sit down beside yourself like a friend and say, "I'm not here to change you today. I'm just here to be with you." And in that pause, something extraordinary happens. The war inside you begins to quiet. The parts of you that were bracing for judgment begin to soften. The inner critic, confused by the lack of opposition, starts to lose its grip. And for a moment, maybe the first time in years, you feel what it's like to simply exist without the burden of becoming. This is not giving up. This is waking up. This is the radical act of stepping out of the illusion that your worth is dependent on your progress. This is the return to your original self, the one that existed before the world told you to be more. In Zen Buddhism, there is a phrase, "just this." It is the ultimate expression of presence, of surrender, of non-striving. It means this moment is enough. This breath is enough. This body is enough. This feeling, whatever it is welcome. It is not an invitation to fix, but to witness, to experience, to allow. What would happen if you lived like that? Not forever. Not even for a year, but just for one day, one afternoon, one breath. What would happen if you stopped trying to improve and simply allowed yourself to feel what's here? Maybe, for the first time, you would notice how tired you are. Not just physically, but spiritually. Tired of pretending, tired of performing, tired of chasing a version of yourself that keeps moving further away the closer you get. Maybe you would feel sadness, not because you're failing, but because you've spent so long believing you had to earn your place on this earth. Maybe you would feel relief that finally someone, you, is willing to meet you exactly where you are. And in that meeting, in that moment of non-resistance, the healing begins. Not the kind of healing that comes from effort, but the kind that comes from rest. The kind that arrives when the nervous system is no longer under attack, when the heart is no longer being edited, when the soul is no longer being silenced. And you remember something so obvious it hurts. You are not broken. You never were. The pain, the fear, the shame, these are not flaws. They are signals, messages, evidence that you are deeply alive, that you have felt, that you have loved, that you have lost. And none of these experiences make you unworthy. They make you human. And maybe being human is not something to escape from. Maybe it is something to return to bow to celebrate. There is a time for growth, a time for expansion, a time to stretch and strive and reach. But there is also a time to stop, to sit down, to breathe, to place your hand on your heart and say, "This is enough." There is a time to listen, not for what needs to change, but for what needs to be held. There is a time to ask not, "How can I be better?" but What do I need to feel safe in myself? And when you ask this question, the answer is rarely achievement. It is presence, it is warmth, it is kindness, it is being seen and accepted, even in your rawest form. And this is where the true transformation happens, not from fixing, but from feeling. Not from doing, but from being. Not from striving, but from softening. So today, if you feel tired from the endless self-improvement, if you feel weary from carrying the weight of who you think you're supposed to be, I invite you to stop, to rest, to return. Not to a better version of yourself, but to the one who's been waiting all along. The one who never needed to be perfect. The one who never asked for anything more than love. The one who is and has always been enough. Just this. Just now. Just you. When you feel like you're falling behind in life, the illusion of time and the truth of your own rhythm. There will be seasons when your soul feels misaligned with the speed of the world. You'll look around and it will seem as if everyone is moving forward, earning degrees, building careers, marrying, traveling, buying homes, collecting milestones like shiny badges on a timeline that keeps marching forward without you. And in those moments, a quiet panic begins to creep in. A restlessness that sounds like, I'm too late. A sadness that says, I'm not enough. A fear that screams, I've missed my chance. You scroll through pictures of people smiling, celebrating, announcing, achieving, and without realizing it, you begin to compare your hidden healing with their highlight reel. You measure your private process against their public progress. And you begin to wonder, have I wasted my life? But here is the truth that rarely gets spoken. You are not behind. You are simply on a different timeline. A timeline that does not follow the world's clock, but your soul's compass. And that compass is sacred. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be forced. It does not operate on deadlines. It moves with the seasons of your inner world. Slow, steady, wise. Buddhism teaches us to release attachment, not just to things, but to outcomes, to identities, and most of all, to timelines. Because time, as we experience it, is not a truth. It is a construct, a mental framework we inherited, a lens through which we are taught to see value. But the soul does not follow clocks. The heart does not bloom on command. The spirit does not unfold according to schedules. You are not a project to be completed. You are a being to be lived. And living does not always look like advancing. Sometimes it looks like pausing. Sometimes it looks like stepping back. Sometimes it looks like stillness, like wandering, like waiting. And that waiting is not wasted time. It is sacred preparation. It is gestation. It is the silent, invisible work of becoming. Think of a tree. It does not bloom all year long. It sheds, it rests, it becomes bare, and yet we do not call it lazy. We do not shame it for its quiet seasons. We understand that the flowering comes after the stillness, that the roots grow deepest in the dark, that growth is not always visible, but it is always happening. So why do we not extend the same grace to ourselves? Why do we only celebrate what is seen, achieved, or shared? Why do we forget that much of our becoming happens in the silence, in the waiting, in the not yet? When you feel like you're falling behind, pause, breathe. Ask yourself gently, behind, compared to what? Whose timeline are you using as your ruler? Whose expectations have you internalized? What silent contracts are you still honoring? Contracts that were written not by your truth, but by the world's fear. You were not born to race. You were born to remember the sound of your own voice beneath the noise, to remember the rhythm of your own breath, unhurried and whole, to remember the pace of presence, where life is not measured in milestones, but in moments of true connection, with yourself, with others, with this earth. Comparison is the thief of peace, not because others are ahead, but because it distracts you from your own path. It seduces you into believing that life is a competition, that there's one narrow path to success. That fulfillment comes from catching up instead of coming home. But you don't need to catch up. You need to wake up. Wake up to the life that is still here, still sacred, still waiting to be felt, not just performed. Because no one else is living your life. No one else has your exact path, your precise lessons, your unique unfoldings. And so, no one else gets to define your timeline, the pace of your healing, the timing of your discoveries, the rhythm of your journey. These are all yours and yours alone. You may not have the answers yet. You may not know where you're headed, but you are still worthy, still whole, still allowed to exist without needing to explain yourself. This moment is not a detour. It is not a failure. It is part of your curriculum. It is part of your becoming. It is where you build the invisible muscles of faith, patience, and inner trust. And one day, perhaps sooner than you think, something will click. A door will open. A connection will form. A truth will rise. And it will all make sense. Not because you finally caught up, but because you finally allowed yourself to stop running. You are not late. You are listening. You are not behind. You are deepening. You are not missing out. You are making space. And this space, uncomfortable as it may be, is where transformation brews. You may be in a chapter of your life where the external world offers little to validate your worth. No promotions, no applause, no impressive titles. But the internal world, that's where the gold lies. That's where the unseen work is happening. The quiet dismantling of old stories, the healing of childhood wounds, the awakening of deeper truths. And this work, though invisible, is invaluable. This is the work that will shape every chapter that follows. And when the world finally sees your bloom, they'll call it sudden. They won't know about the seasons you spent underground, tending to roots no one could see. But you will know. You'll know that your timeline was never broken. You'll know that your pace was never a problem. You'll know that your becoming was never meant to look like theirs. So today, if you feel like you are falling behind, pause. Put your hand on your heart. Feel the breath that is still moving through you. Feel the life that is still unfolding within you. Feel the presence that is still here, unshaken by the noise. And say gently, with all the kindness you can gather, I am not behind, I am becoming. Not on the world's clock, but on my own. And that is more than enough. It is sacred, it is whole, it is mine. 24th, stop forcing clarity. Let life reveal its meaning in stillness, not struggle. There will be times in your life when everything feels like fog. You can't see the next step. You can't make sense of where you are. You don't know what's right or what's wrong, what's real or what's illusion, what's intuition and what's fear. You search your heart for answers only to hear silence. You ask the universe for signs only to be met with confusion. You pray for clarity, but it doesn't come in the form you want. And in that uncertainty, you start to panic. You start to grasp. You start to try harder, thinking that if you just push more, think more, do more, the answer will arrive. But the more you struggle, the cloudier it becomes, because clarity is not something you force, it is something you allow. Buddhism teaches that insight comes not from grasping, but from letting go. That wisdom does not bloom in the clenched fists of control, but in the open palms of presence. That the mind, when agitated, becomes like a stormy lake, impossible to see through. But when the mind is still, when the waters calm, the reflection becomes clear. Not because the answer changed, but because you did. And so often, when we seek clarity, what we are really seeking is control. We want guarantees, we want assurance, we want the discomfort of not knowing to end. But life does not work on command. The soul is not a vending machine. The deeper truths of our lives, the why behind our pain, the where of our path, the when of our breakthroughs, these are not facts to be downloaded. They are mysteries to be lived into. And living into mystery requires patience. It requires trust. It requires the courage to sit in the dark without rushing for the light. Think of a seed underground. It cannot see the sun. It has no map, no calendar, no forecast of when it will break through the soil, and yet it grows, not because it forces growth, but because it surrenders to the process, because it trusts the intelligence inside it, because it follows the quiet instructions of nature whispering from within. You are no different. There is an intelligence inside you, a timing, a rhythm, a wisdom deeper than logic. And when you stop trying to force answers, you begin to hear it. It speaks not in words, but in feelings, in nudges, in deep, slow knowing, in the peace that comes not from figuring it all out, but from realizing you don't need to. Clarity is not a destination. It is a byproduct. It is what arises when you stop grasping and start breathing. It is what arrives when you stop chasing and start allowing. It is what emerges when you stop demanding and start listening. But listening requires stillness. Not just external stillness, but internal surrender. The kind of surrender that says, I don't know, and that's okay. The kind that says, I don't need to fix this moment, I need to feel it. The kind that says, if clarity is not here, then maybe confusion is what I need right now. Because confusion is not always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes it's a sign that something new is trying to be born. That your old ways of understanding no longer serve you. That your mind is outgrowing the framework it used to live in. And in that gap between the old and the new, there is discomfort. There is silence. There is space. And that space is sacred. It is not empty, it is full of possibility. But you cannot hear that possibility when you are shouting over it with your need to know. You cannot feel its guidance when you are drowning it with your mental noise. You cannot walk its path when you are busy constructing your own. So what do you do when clarity doesn't come? You pause, you breathe, you stop interrogating the moment. You stop demanding that life give you answers on your schedule. You soften your gaze and begin to notice the quiet truths that were always there, beneath the noise, behind the fear, within the silence. You ask not, what do I need to know, but what do I need to feel? You ask not, what is the answer, but what is the question that keeps arising? You ask not, what should I do, but who am I when I stop doing? And in that stillness, you begin to sense something you had forgotten, that your worth does not come from clarity, that you are allowed to exist in the fog, that the path is still valid, even when it is invisible. You begin to see that life is not a puzzle to be solved, but a poem to be lived. That meaning is not found through analysis, but through presence. That sometimes the most honest answer is, I don't know. And that not knowing is not weakness. It is humility. It is openness. It is the doorway to something real. And when clarity finally arrives, not as a lightning bolt but as a gentle unfolding, you will know that it was not your striving that brought it. It was your surrender. It was your willingness to sit beside your confusion like a friend instead of treating it like an enemy. It was your ability to trust the process even when you couldn't see the outcome. And this kind of clarity, it doesn't come with noise. It doesn't come with fanfare. It arrives like dawn, slowly, softly, inevitably. And when it does, you don't feel smarter. You feel quieter, more grounded, more aligned. You feel like something inside you has returned, not a new piece of information, but an old part of yourself you had forgotten. So if you are in a season of fog, do not rush through it. Do not declare it a problem. Do not assume you are lost. You are being prepared. You are being softened. You are being shown a new way of seeing, one that doesn't rely on sight, but on stillness. Let the fog be fog. Let the questions remain questions. Let the silence speak, and trust that life knows what it's doing, even when you don't, especially when you don't. 25, when you finally understand that letting go isn't giving up, it's returning to peace. There comes a moment in every seeker's life when they reach the end of their striving, not because the goal has been reached, not because the problem has been solved, but because the soul grows weary, not from weakness, but from wisdom. Because it begins to realize that some battles are not meant to be won, but to be walked away from. Some dreams are not meant to be chased, but to be surrendered. Some questions are not meant to be answered, but to be outgrown. In a world that tells you to never give up, letting go can feel like failure, like betrayal, like loss. We are conditioned to equate surrender with weakness, to associate release with defeat. We are taught that holding on is strength, that endurance is virtue, that persistence is everything. So we cling, we fight. We stay longer than we should, in relationships, in beliefs, in stories, in versions of ourselves that no longer reflect who we are. But there is a deeper truth beneath all that noise. Buddhism teaches that clinging is the root of suffering, not because our desires are evil, but because our attachments become prisons. We begin to identify so strongly with what we want, what we believe, what we fear, that we lose sight of the still, silent truth beneath it all, that life is change, that we too are meant to change, and that peace is not found in control, but in flow. Letting go is not the same as giving up. One is an act of faith, the other is an act of fear. To give up is to say, I am powerless. To let go is to say, I no longer need to control this to feel powerful. To give up is to collapse under pressure. To let go is to rise above it. To give up is to abandon yourself. To let go is to return to yourself. And yet letting go is one of the most misunderstood forms of power, because it doesn't look strong. It doesn't look impressive. It doesn't come with applause or awards. It often happens in silence, in solitude, in the quiet moment when you finally exhale after years of holding your breath, when you stop replaying the conversation in your head, when you stop trying to convince them to understand, when you stop trying to be someone else to be loved, when you stop waiting for closure from a door that has already closed. Letting go is when you stop chasing what you thought life should be and begin living what life actually is. It is the soft, sacred rebellion of the soul saying, I am done carrying what is not mine. It is the quiet turning of the page, even when you don't know what the next chapter holds. It is the gentle release of the rope you've been gripping so tightly that your hands have forgotten how to open, and when you finally open them, you realize they were never empty. They were always holding you. When you let go, you don't lose yourself. You find yourself underneath the roles, the expectations, the illusions. You begin to hear your own voice again, not the one shaped by fear or people-pleasing, but the one that rises from your core like a warm wind, steady and soft. You begin to feel light, not because the world has changed, but because you've stopped trying to carry what isn't yours. You begin to walk differently, not with urgency or desperation, but with presence and poise. And slowly, the world begins to respond, not because you forced it to, but because you've returned to the rhythm of reality. You've stopped swimming against the current. You've stopped arguing with the truth. You've stopped demanding that life give you what you think you want, and begun receiving what you truly need. And what you need is peace. Not the kind that comes from escaping discomfort, but the kind that comes from making peace with discomfort itself. The kind that says, even if this is unresolved, I will rest. The kind that says, even if I don't understand yet, I will breathe. The kind that says, even if this didn't end the way I hoped, I will heal. Letting go is not a single act. It is a practice. You will have to let go again and again of people, of plans, of patterns, of identities. You will have to forgive without hearing sorry. You will have to love without expecting it back. You will have to trust without seeing the whole path. You will have to grieve dreams that no longer fit your growth. And you will have to remind yourself over and over that peace is not something you chase. It is something you allow. And sometimes, to allow peace, you have to say goodbye. To the version of yourself who thought she needed to fix everything, to the beliefs that told you you were only worthy when you achieved something, to the habits that kept you safe but also small, to the stories that made you the victim, the savior, the martyr, to the timelines that told you you're behind, to the noise that drowned out your own knowing. You do not need to hold it all. You do not need to solve it all. You do not need to carry it all alone. There is a great freedom that comes when you finally understand this. Your peace matters more than your performance. Your inner world is more important than their opinions. Your quiet joy is more valuable than outward validation. And the moment you let go, not from defeat, but from wisdom, you step into a new way of living. A way that is softer, slower, deeper. A way that trusts the unfolding instead of rushing it. A way that honors the process instead of fighting it. A way that chooses presence over pressure. You may still feel the ache of what you released. You may still wonder what could have been. You may still have moments of doubt. But beneath all of that, there will be space. Space for something new to grow. Space for peace to root. Space for you to breathe. And that breath, that is where life begins again. Not the life you planned, but the life that was waiting for you all along, on the other side of letting go. If you've walked with these lessons, sat with their silence, and opened your heart to their truth, then you already understand. The greatest transformation doesn't happen in noise, but in stillness. Not in chasing, but in surrender. Not in force, but in flow. Life was never asking you to be perfect, to be always certain, or to control its unfolding. It was only ever whispering, gently, again and again, "Trust me." And that trust is not blind. It is not passive. It is an awakening, a return, a sacred alignment with something deeper than logic and louder than fear. The universe is not punishing you when it slows you down. It is preparing you. It is softening the edges that no longer serve you. It is loosening the grip of all that is not meant to stay. You are not broken because you feel lost. You are not weak because you feel tired. You are not behind because your timeline doesn't match the world's noise. You are exactly where you are meant to be, in the middle of your becoming, in the sacred space between the old and the new. And from this space, if you let yourself be still enough, something begins to rise. Not a loud answer, but a quiet knowing that you are not alone, that you have never been, and that everything, every delay, every detour, every doubt was part of your unfolding. Buddhism does not offer escape from life. It offers presence within it. The teachings don't promise that you won't hurt, but they do show you how to meet your pain with compassion, how to breathe through your fear without becoming it, how to move with uncertainty without rushing to fix it, how to find stillness, not when life is calm, but especially when it is not. So, as you step forward, may you release what no longer carries truth. May you stop chasing what was never meant for you. May you trust the pace of your own becoming. May you allow life to lead, not with force, but with faith. May your heart remain open, your steps remain gentle, and your spirit remain anchored in presence. Because when you stop needing to control the path begins to reveal itself. When you stop needing to be strong all the time, softness becomes your strength. And when you stop trying to find clarity through effort, it finds you through surrender. Let life teach you. Let silence guide you. Let love hold you. And most of all, let go, not to lose control, but to remember what true peace feels like. You are not late. You are not lost. You are simply learning how to trust life as it is. And in that trust, you return to the truth you've always carried, that you are whole, that you are enough, and that the universe, quietly, patiently, lovingly, has always been on your side.